Chapter 279. Haya. Pulling his fist behind his back like a bow. His entire fist was covered by a whirlpool-like halo of airflow. While roaring, he charged forward. His fist was like the heavy hammer of the thunder god, and in the midst of a muffled explosion, it blasted forward. There, Noah wasn't wearing a uniform, but rather a shirt, trousers, and a jacket. He raised his eyes and stared at the 9-layer penetrations that had mercilessly used its strongest attack on him. The corners of his mouth curled up. Wang! At some point, Noah also pulled his fist behind him like a drawn bow. Around his fist, specks of golden brilliance appeared, like bright golden starlight, converging on Noah's fist. In the end, it also turned into a whirlpool-like halo of airflow, illuminating the surroundings. Without the slightest hesitation, regardless of whether it was Noah or the 9-layer penetrations, both were truly terrifying attacks. Even the air was scorching due to the friction between the attacks. They were like two cannonballs as they ruthlessly bombarded each other. In the next instant, the fists that were enveloped by the swirling airflow collided with each other. Bang! Amidst the thunderous explosion, the violent shockwave carried with it a thick smoke and dust, like a stormy sea, surging in all directions. Kacha-kacha. Wherever the shockwaves passed, the ground cracked open inch by inch. Pa-pa-pa-pa. In an extremely straightforward manner, the surrounding trees seemed to have been smashed by an invisible heavy hammer. Under the assault of the shockwave, the trees were snapped at the waist and fell to the side, stirring up countless pieces of wood that shot out like bullets in all directions. Thick smoke and dust filled the air. At the center of the thick smoke and dust, two figures emerged from the two sides of the mushroom-like smoke and flew out. They rushed out of the area covered by the smoke and dust and stabilized themselves. However, the situation of the two people who flew out of the smoke and dust was somewhat different. The 9-layer penetrations seemed to have crashed into a wall at an extremely fast speed and was fiercely bounced back. Not only was his figure in a sorry state, but he also violently retreated a dozen steps in the heavy sound of thump thump thump, and then he struggled to stabilize his body. Noah, on the other hand, was just the opposite. His body was as light as a feather, as though he was blown by a light breeze. He leaped out of the smoke and dust, and tapped the ground twice with the tip of his feet. Then he simply landed on the ground. His clothes were not dirty at all. From the performance and state of the two, it could be seen who was stronger and who was weaker. Ha! The 9-layer penetrations gasped for breath, staring at Noah on the opposite side. After a while he raised his hand. The hand was shaking. Moreover, blood was still oozing out. Glancing at Noah, who appeared to be calm and carefree, and then glancing at his slightly trembling fist that was dripping with blood, 9-layer Totoro sighed and sat down on the ground with a paw sound. Forget it, I won't fight, consider it my loss. The 9-layer penetrations used the predecessor of the annihilation strike that Noah had not modified. Therefore, using this move would put a great burden on the body of the 9-layer penetrations. Even the 9-layer penetrations could only be used twice a day, and the limit was 3 times. However, after using it 3 times, he could not even think of getting up from the ground. Although he had only used it once, the 9-layer penetrations could still feel the pain in his arm, and it was very difficult to move it again. That was not only because 9-layer penetration had used a move that placed a heavy burden on the body, but also because the power of Noah's annihilation strike was greater than 9-layer penetration, causing 9-layer penetration's arm to be injured even more. Under such circumstances, even if he could use this move one more time, the 9-layer penetrations felt that he wouldn't be able to raise his fist. He might as well just admit defeat and be done with it. Finally willing to admit defeat? Compared to the 9-layer penetrations, Noah just shook his fist, and then said to the 9-layer penetrations with a smile that was not a smile, I thought you wouldn't admit defeat if I didn't beat you down like Huchi did. Really? Useless. Not far from the ground, Oki, who was lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out, said sarcastically, being defeated by someone who stole a move from you, it doesn't feel good, right? I don't want to be mocked by someone who can't even land a punch. The 9-layer penetrations also mocked Oki. At least I found a chance to land a punch. Humph. Oki choked and angrily snorted. Haha. The 9-layer penetrations laughed a few times, then sighed after a while. In the end, I couldn't even defeat you once before you left. There's nothing to be sad about. Noah stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and pulled the 9-layer penetrations up from the ground, and looked straight into his eyes. There's no end to learning, and everyone has to constantly improve. Right now, you're already at level 3, and I've also smoothly risen to level 4. You're becoming stronger, and so am I. It's just a matter of whether you can become stronger than me. That's right. Oki struggled to stand up from the ground. You're stronger now, but that doesn't mean you'll be stronger than us in the future. Hearing this, Noah shook his head and laughed. Then let's see if you can catch up. When he said this, Noah wasn't being perfunctory. Even if there was a hidden power in his body that was much stronger than what was shown on the surface, Noah didn't think that he could always lead. Not because of anything else, but because a person's potential was limitless. Cookie Tokusatsu was one thing, but ninefold Tokusatsu gave Noah the same feeling as Naz and Rentaro. They both had unlimited possibilities. Therefore, if one day, the 9-layer penetration suddenly became very strong, stronger than Noah when he showed his true strength, Noah wouldn't be surprised, let alone deny such a possibility. It was precisely because of this mentality that Noah could continue to grow without taking credit for himself. He was becoming stronger every minute and every second. The 9-layer penetrations took a deep breath, extended his bleeding fist at Noah, and said with a determined face, "Let's fight again next time." Noah smiled and nodded. He extended his fist, and didn't care that the 9-layer penetrations was still bleeding, and heavily bumped his fist with the 9-layer penetrations. "Let's fight again next time." Hey. Oki was suddenly dissatisfied. "Don't forget about me." Ha 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 ha. Noah and the 9-layer penetrations suddenly laughed out loud. At this time, a figure trotted to the scene. Originally he was running and panting, but when he saw Noah, his footsteps slowed down and slowly approached. Noah naturally noticed, and turned his head, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. Ivanli? Ivanli was panting and calming his breathing, and didn't speak. He just quietly looked at Noah, and Noah didn't know what to say. The 9-layer penetrations and Oki looked at each other, and tactfully left quietly, and walked towards the direction of the hotel. At the scene, only Noah and Ivanli were left. "What's wrong?" Noah scratched his cheek. "What's the matter?" Ivanli still didn't speak. He just stepped forward, grabbed Noah's hand, and silently walked towards the hotel. Noticing that Ivanli seemed to have something to say to him, Noah didn't break away from Ivanli's hand, and followed Ivanli's lead, walking forward. Hotel, rooftop. After a night, there were still traces of the fierce battle from last night on the rooftop. There were scorch marks and holes everywhere, and it was a complete mess. Especially the place where the military transport aircraft used by the God Destroyer troop was originally located. There was a large area of scorch marks, showing the intensity of the fire last night. Under Ivanli's lead, Noah came to the messy rooftop. Whoosh! The wind blew past and raised Noah's coat, as well as Ivanli's ponytail and skirt. Standing on the edge of the rooftop, looking into the distance, Noah and Ivanli stood side by side, and didn't speak, temporarily enjoying the peace. However, this peace was destined to last for a long time, because time was limited. Hey! Not long after, under the light breeze, Ivanli said such a sentence. It sounded like a soliloquy, but also like a plea, and it was almost covered by the wind, as if he was absent-minded. "How can I become as strong as you?" Noah didn't expect Ivanli's first sentence to be like this, and directly froze. Chapter 280. Ivanli. Noah called Ivanli tentatively. He really didn't understand why Ivanli would suddenly ask such a question. Ivanli seemed to be aware of this. He didn't look at Noah. Instead, he looked into the distance and said to himself, "Do you remember why I became a surpasser and entered Haolang Academy?" Noah nodded. Because of this, Noah was even more confused. The reason why Ivanli accepted the Daybreak Star rune, became a surpasser, and entered Haolang Academy was all for his family business. For the sake of the small factory left by his grandfather that was about to close down, Ivanli chose to enter Haolang Academy. This was not only because he could earn 100,000 yen a month for his living expenses if he studied in the academy, but also because if he successfully graduated from the academy, he could join the Dawn organization's security force and become a tomb protector, earning a high salary that ordinary people could not obtain. With this money, Ivanli could revitalize his family business. Therefore, all along, Ivanli's biggest goal was to work hard to reach level 3. Only by successfully rising to rank 3 could Ivanli successfully graduate from the academy and enter the Dawn organization to work. This goal was basically achieved by Ivanli. In other words, as long as he could reach level 3, Ivanli would be satisfied. He didn't particularly force himself to be strong. However, now, Ivanli asked a question that was completely different from his previous plan. Become stronger? Ivanli, do you also want to become stronger? Actually, in the beginning, I wanted to become stronger. Ivanli seemed to be able to guess what Noah was thinking. His gem-like eyes met with Noah's eyes. That's because the first person I met in school, my roommate from tripping double blade for only a week, is a very strong person. With such a strong friend by his side, if I can't catch up to him, I feel like I don't have the qualifications to stand beside him. However, I gave up in the end. Ivanli said in a relieved and less stubborn tone. His face relaxed. He's really ridiculously strong. It's fine if he's just strong, but the speed of his progress makes people feel powerless. He's also very experienced and knowledgeable. It's impossible to catch up with him with just a little effort. So although I've tried my best to catch up with him, I've never thought of catching up with him. Just like that, in the constant pursuit, I successfully rose to rank 3. At this point, a slightly bitter smile appeared on Ivanli's face. If I want to successfully graduate from the academy, I only need to reach rank 3. Because I successfully reached rank 3, I began to feel satisfied. Unknowingly, I actually forgot that I still have to catch up to him, and not let him leave me behind. Noah fell silent. He had already guessed what Ivanli wanted to say. Julie is very strong. That child should be the strongest girl besides Lilith. Ba comes from a martial arts family, and his combat power is also very high. Lilith is even more so. Even if Julie and Ba fight together, they might not be able to win against Lilith. Ivanli showed an extremely confused expression. Compared to them, although I'm also rank 3, I'm not that strong. If I'm stronger, I can fight side by side with you like Lilith. You're already very strong. Noah finally couldn't help but say this. In the entire first grade, your combat power can definitely be ranked in the top 5. Even compared to the upper grades, you're not inferior. But I still can't help, right? Ivanli smiled weakly at Noah. I'm sorry, Noah. Actually, I really want to fight with you. Ivanli. Undoubtedly, in his heart, he had the urge to say a lot of things to Ivanli. But in the end, Noah only called out Ivanli's name. The words that were in his throat couldn't be spat out. Seeing Noah's speechless expression, Ivanli laughed instead. I'm just complaining. The haze on his pretty face was swept away, and he regained his usual cheerfulness. Ivanli gave Noah a little punch and teased. You don't have to be so embarrassed. After that, Ivanli turned around, took a few steps forward, and then turned around again facing Noah. With his hands behind his back, he bent down, and his gem-like eyes sparkled as he looked straight at Noah. However, I will no longer be satisfied with my current strength. Reaching rank 3, my previous goal can be considered completed. Now my new goal is to catch up with you and become stronger. Stronger than Julie, stronger than Lilith, and even stronger than you. Have you made a promise with me? Like a child, Ivan stretched out his little finger and stared at Noah. I will definitely become stronger. So next time, you can't drive me away. You must let me fight with you. Looking at Ivanli, who stood in front of him and stretched out his pinky, with an unquestionable expression on his pretty face, Noah seemed to have returned to the time when he first entered Haolang Academy. Ouch! Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose, are you okay? It's okay. It's just a touch, it doesn't hurt that much. It's my fault for moving my head closer. Otherwise, I wouldn't have touched it. Moving closer? Moving closer? Ah, sorry, because I was very interested in the things inside. I unconsciously moved closer. It should be something like a bamboo sword, right? I also learned a bit of swordsmanship, and I used to carry a bamboo sword bag just like you. So I was a little curious and followed behind you. You don't mind, right? The young girl with the brown ponytail said to Noah, who was carrying a knightly sword on his back, as if she was suddenly enlightened. Oh right, let me introduce myself. My name is Ivanli Nagankang. Nice to meet you. Thinking back to the cheerful girl at that time, Noah felt a surge of warmth in his heart. Ivanli, you are the first friend I made in this world. Noah reached out his hand and put his little finger on Ivanli's little finger. Looking straight into Ivanli's eyes, Noah smiled in a carefree manner. I believe that the next time we meet, you will be much stronger than you are now. At that time, let's fight side by side. Okay. Ivanli smiled sweetly, her smile unprecedentedly beautiful. It's a promise. Under the sky on the rooftop, a man and a woman's pinky linked under each other's witness, not letting go for a long time. In the afternoon, with 99 lunar nights as the leader, Eugenli Bunny, and the three kingdoms accompanying them, Ivanli, Julie, Lilith, Tachaba, Kijijituriu, Kue Tokasaki, and a group of Dawn Organization's tomb guardians all left the hotel and left in a luxury car. After parting with Ivanli on the rooftop, Noah didn't meet a second person. No matter if it was Julie, Lilith, Tachaba, or none of them came to say goodbye to Noah. They all followed the group and returned to the school. Noah on the rooftop also didn't say goodbye to the group of girls. He just watched the luxury cars leave until all the cars disappeared at the end of the road. Only then did Noah disappear from the rooftop and return to Between Worlds. Ding! With a light crisp sound, the two pieces of broken feather gently merged together in the air under Noah's gaze and became whole again. Its whole body emitted a soft white light, and like a little bird, it cheerfully circled around Noah. Phew! Noah let out a sigh of relief and exhaled a scorching hot breath. However, just as Noah let out a sigh of relief, the piece of feather that had just recovered rotated and came in front of Noah. Buzz, buzz, buzz! The feather that was emitting a white light trembled as if it was urging something. Noah, who had never encountered such a situation before, had a face full of surprise. Buzz, buzz, buzz! The feather that represented the world also seemed to be urging something, as it constantly trembled. Noah reacted. After hesitating for a while, he made up his mind and reached out his hand, gently placing it on the feather in front of him. In the next moment, a dense white light burst out from the feather. When the white light dissipated, Noah had already disappeared from the spot and entered this world. Chapter 281. The moment he entered the new world, before Noah had time to open his eyes, he felt his body was suddenly pulled into another place. A sense of weightlessness attacked his five senses. It felt like he was sitting in a car driving to the end of a straight road. But suddenly another road extended from the sky in front of the car. Noah was sitting in, allowing the car, carrying Noah to rush into the road and into the sky without any reduction in momentum. This description was the most appropriate, because after entering this world, Noah should have followed the passage into this world, that is the first road, to reach the interior of this world. But in the process of going to this world, the second road suddenly extended and changed Noah's destination. The world was still the same world, but the end, that is the destination, was different. Noah, who should have directly descended into the interior of the world, found himself in a very wonderful place. After opening his eyes, Noah was presented in front of a snow-white world. In this snow-white world, who knows how far away, there was an existence that looked like a sphere, a vortex, a black hole, and a nebula. It gave people a feeling that it was absolutely impossible to approach. It seemed illusory and suspended at the end of the snow-white world. This was a place very similar to Between the Worlds. The difference was that Between the Worlds gave Noah the feeling of being in a mother's body, but it seemed that it could only contain him, making him completely unable to touch the infinite dreamy feeling. But this snow-white world gave Noah a feeling of vastness and shock. Although there was comfort, there was no infinite dreamy feeling, but more of a strange feeling. Noah didn't have time to observe this world at all, nor did he have time to observe what kind of situation he was in. Almost less than 3 seconds after Noah entered this snow-white world, Noah's heart thumped. He didn't observe this snow-white world, nor did he observe his current situation. Instead, he raised his head and looked above himself. Buzz! A burst of scorching white light rose into the air. Noah was startled, stretched out his hand, and blocked the dazzling white light in front of him. However, an inexplicable impulse controlled Noah's actions, making Noah open his eyes. Even if it was dazzling, he was unwilling to close his eyes. Through his hand, he stared at the center of the white light. Then Noah saw. He saw 2 people. To be more precise, he saw 2 girls. They were 2 young girls who were inconceivable in every way. The 2 girls looked to be around 12 or 13 years old. The girl on the left had long water-colored hair, releasing an extremely terrifying sense of existence. Facing this girl, Noah felt that he was facing the entire starry sky, unusually small. The young lady on the right had a head of long silver hair. Although she exuded a strong sense of presence, she exuded a strong sense of coercion. Facing this young lady, Noah felt as though he was standing in the middle of a massive ocean. He could be submerged at any moment and become part of the ocean. These 2 feelings made Noah extremely shocked. There was no way not to be shocked. In this life, the most powerful people Noah had seen since he was born were Makarov, Kildas and Laxus. However, Noah's intuition told him that these 3 people, not to mention standing alone, even if there were 100, 1,000 or 10,000 of them, they wouldn't be qualified to stand in front of these 2 girls who didn't seem to have reached adulthood. Moreover, they weren't even qualified to carry shoes. This was not because Noah could see how powerful these 2 girls were. On the contrary, Noah had such a feeling because he couldn't see how powerful these 2 girls were. These 2 girls, who were they? Just when Noah was still shocked, in the white light, the girl with long silver hair and the girl with long silver hair cast their eyes on Noah at the same time, and then took a step forward. That it was as if the whole world was making way for these 2 girls. With just one step, the 2 girls suddenly disappeared and suddenly appeared in front of Noah. They stared at Noah with a pair of eyes. The girl with long blue hair revealed an extremely obvious joy in her eyes. The girl with long silver hair's eyes only slightly fluctuated a few times, and then returned to a calm and emotionless state. Noah couldn't help but take a step back. He was supposed to be the best at controlling his emotions, but at this moment, he couldn't control the rolling waves in his heart. This was because when the 2 girls appeared in front of him, Noah actually had a very strong sense of intimacy. No, it should be called intimacy. It should be said that it was like finding a long-lost relative, and there was a feeling of blood connection. Noah was almost speechless, and his eyes were extremely gloomy. Seeing that Noah couldn't calm down, the girl with long silver hair looked at him expressionlessly, while the girl with long blue hair smiled sweetly and said to Noah in an intimate tone, "You can call me Gaia." Gaia? Noah couldn't help but be stunned. As for the girl with long silver hair, she raised her head slightly and nodded gently at Noah, and said very concisely, "Aleya." This should be the name of the girl with long silver hair. Gaia. Aleya. 2 existences that shocked Noah. Although there was no basis, Noah felt that after entering this world, he would come here should be the doings of these 2 girls. Who? At this moment, Noah took a deep breath, calmed down the various emotions in his heart, and finally restored himself to calmness. Of course, this calmness was also very forced. From Gaia and Aleya, he felt a constant sense of closeness and a similar feeling of blood connection, which affected Noah, making him smile bitterly. "You are," I said before, "my name is Gaia." Gaia said with a smile, and she seemed to be in a good mood. "In terms of name, this is it. In terms of identity, I am the will of the earth, and I am the control force. If it is difficult to understand, you can think of me as a part of this world." Aleya. As if to create a sharp contrast with Gaia, Aleya was expressionless, and it was impossible to tell whether her mood was good or bad. Only a pair of bright eyes were staring at Noah. The collective body of human consciousness, the control force, forms a part of this world. A part of this world. If it was someone else who said this, Noah would be skeptical even if he didn't completely believe it. However, when this sentence came from the mouth of these two girls who were very unbelievable in all aspects, Noah had no choice but to believe it. Because only this explanation could explain why these two girls who seemed to be only 12 or 13 years old gave Noah such a vast and boundless feeling. Without giving Noah much time to react, the seemingly cheerful Gaia excitedly said to Noah, "You are Noah, right? I finally meet you. It was us who brought you here." Alea still used the simplest words to explain to Noah. "Because you have just restored this world, we are able to use this world that has just stabilized to guide you, who is in the space between worlds, to let you follow our guidance and enter this world." Noah finally understood. It seemed that the strange movement of the feather that had just been restored was completely due to the actions of these two girls, who claimed to be a part of this world. "You," Noah asked with uncertainty, "are you really a part of this world? We are the will of the planet and humans. Strictly speaking, we only represent the planet and humans. We cannot represent this world. However, we are the control force of this world." Gaia patiently explained, "This world itself does not have a will. Therefore, our control force can be considered as representing this world. You are the chosen savior of the world, the darling of the world." Alea said this sentence without stopping until it shocked Gaia to death. "Therefore, you can also call us mother." Chapter 282. Mother? Noah, who had finally calmed down and regained his composure, was caught off guard by this term. It was as if his head was hit by a stick and he was stunned. Mother? Two mothers. Two mothers who looked to be 12 or 13 years old. Moreover, one is the will of the planet, and the other is the will of a human? Then what am I? For a moment, Noah even had the urge to complain. However, the feeling of intimacy and blood connection from Gaia and Alea made Noah unable to complain. Why do Gaia and Alea give me such a feeling of blood connection? Could it be that they are really my mother? Then what am I? The same thought. If there was a reason to complain in the beginning, then now, the thought of what am I made Noah's heart completely chaotic. Originally, Noah could not be considered a normal human. Would a normal human be born with the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old? Would a normal human have 3 inexplicable constitutions? How could a normal human possess such godlike senses? Would a normal human be able to travel between different worlds? All these signs indicated that Noah was most likely not a human. Then what is Noah? Alea said that Noah was the chosen savior of the world, the darling of the world. Then why did the world choose Noah? Why didn't it choose someone else? Am I considered a human? Noah realized that his heart was in a mess like never before. Even though Noah already knew that he was not a normal human. At this moment Alea, who had been watching Noah, suddenly spoke. "You are a human." Noah was stunned on the spot. "Little Noah, don't doubt yourself." Gaia floated in front of Noah and patted Noah's head like a little adult. Alea is an amalgamation of the human unconscious. It represents the existence of all humans. Since Alea said that you are a human, then you are definitely a human. No one can doubt it. Gaia and Alea's words were like a warm current that drilled into Noah's heart, making Noah's heart inconceivably calm down. Gaia was right. Alea was an existence that represented all of humanity. Since Alea said, "You are a human," there was probably no one more convincing than Alea to say this. However, if I am a human, why is my constitution so special? Why do I have the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old when I was born? Why am I the so-called darling of the world? As expected of an existence that represented all humans, Alea immediately saw through Noah's thoughts and shook its head at Noah. You don't have to feel confused about your own existence. You will know everything sooner or later. That's right, that's right. The Gaia person made a teaching gesture. Little Noah, you just need to know that we are all your mothers. Come call us mommy. A cute little girl who looks 12 or 13 years old is urging me to call her mommy with an innocent expression. What kind of feeling is that? In any case, Noah felt that regardless of whether Gaia and Alea were his real mothers, as long as he called them that, he would definitely become a sinner of the world. Thus Noah said shamefully, I will call you Gaia and Alea. Regarding this, Alea silently expressed its agreement, as though it didn't care about a superficial form of address. However, Gaia puffed up her cheeks and was very dissatisfied. And why? Why? Does Gaia really not know, or is she pretending not to know? Noah was extremely speechless. However, he didn't realize that he had already treated Gaia and Alea as his family. Not for other reasons, but even if it was because of the inexplicable closeness and bloodline connection, Noah would still acknowledge Gaia and Alea. As for Gaia, it seemed like she was just complaining. A second ago, she was still panting with anger, but in the next second, she smiled happily. Forget it. Being able to see little Noah is already enough to make me happy. Alea nodded and looked straight at Noah. This world has already recovered. We can also sense the existence of other world fragments. In this world, there are many parallel worlds. We can only vaguely sense which parallel world the other world fragments are in. We will directly send you to that parallel world. This time Noah was surprised. Didn't this world just recover? How could there be world fragments in this world? In the past, Noah had always been searching for world fragments in a complete world. World fragments would only be lost in a complete world, and would not be lost in a similarly broken world. Then, in a world that had just recovered, why would there be world fragments in it? The reason is simple. Gaia spread out her hands and acted helpless. Because before you, Noah, could grow up and come to this world to retrieve the world fragments that were lost here, this world was already destroyed. Destroyed? Noah held his breath. Speaking of which, why were there so many worlds that were broken into fragments? Some of them were drifting in the world between worlds, and some were lost in a complete world. How did those originally complete worlds become fragments? Noah had never considered this question before. But now it seemed like there was a reason why the world was broken. You don't need to ask. Alea's eyes flickered. You will know sooner or later. Hearing Alea's words, Noah could only suppress the doubts in his heart and let out a sigh. In other words, this world was originally complete. There were also fragments of other worlds that were lost here. But before they could be retrieved, this world was destroyed. Now that this world has recovered, the world fragments that were originally here naturally need to be retrieved, right? Yes, that's right. Gaia nodded her little head. I believe that little Noah also knows that this world has no way of destroying other worlds. We are God's domain, and can be considered as representing this world. So we have no way of destroying other world fragments. You can only find them yourself, and we can only give you some guidance. On the matter of finding world fragments, we can only guide you and give you hints. This world has just recovered, so if we provide you with too much help, it will disrupt the order and balance of this world. Therefore, the help we can provide you is limited. Alea looked at Noah, and for the first time, her eyes showed true emotions. It was as if she could only look at her child running around for her, without being able to help. She was like a real mother with pity, heartache, and gentleness. Unfortunately, this gaze only appeared for a short moment, and after a moment, Alea's eyes returned to its emotionless state. On the other hand, Gaia showed very obvious emotions. We can only take advantage of this loophole and give you a gift. After saying that, Gaia flipped her hand, and a ball of light appeared in her hand. It slowly elongated and finally had a form. It was a scabbard that shone with golden light. Noah's attention was immediately attracted by the scabbard that was lying quietly in Gaia's hand. This is called a treasure. Gaia raised her hand, and the scabbard in her hand floated up and arrived in front of Noah. Originally, this was something that could not be used by anyone other than its owner, but we have transformed it into yours. From today onwards, you are its owner. We will also pass on some essential knowledge of this world to you. We can only provide you with this much substantial help. Alea said, we hope that you can grow faster and grow to the point where you don't need our protection. After saying that, Gaia and Alea raised their hands at the same time, and as if drawing a circle, they drew a line to the left and right. Suddenly, Noah felt as if he was thrown into a tunnel, and the distance between him and Gaia and Alea was pulled infinitely apart, within 1,000th of a second. In the end, Noah's vision turned black, and he lost all his vision in an instant. Wang. The scabbard in Noah's hand suddenly emitted a rich light that enveloped Noah's body. It was like a bubble that enveloped Noah and flew toward the other side of the tunnel. Chapter 283. This was a forest located on the outskirts of a city. At this moment in the winter, the cold wind whistled past, causing the entire forest to be filled with icy cold air. If someone was in this forest, they would definitely be able to vaguely detect some subtle movements. Walala! This was the sound of a river flowing in the forest. This was the subtle sound of the wind. This was the sound of a beast hiding its tracks in the forest. And within these sounds, at a certain moment, a strange vibration sound was mixed in. Above a woodland covered with withered leaves and branches, the space suddenly rotated like a whirlpool, causing the atmosphere to emit a low humming sound. Then, a figure seemed to be spat out by the invisible whirlpool. In the fluctuation of the space, the figure fell out in a slightly embarrassing manner. It was a figure holding a scabbard that was blooming with a bright brilliance, and his entire body was covered by the light released by the scabbard. Wang. In the vibration of the space, the golden figure jumped out, but quickly stabilized his body. He turned his body slightly in midair, and finally landed steadily on the ground. Until then, the invisible whirlpool seemed to have completed its task, and slowly dissipated, leaving only the ruthlessly abandoned youth, looking at the sky with a speechless expression. Still calling yourself a mother? Is there a mother who would throw her own son away like trash? After leaving this sentence, Noah lifted his head and scanned the surroundings. After confirming his current location, he shifted his gaze to the scabbard in his hand. Under Noah's gaze, the scabbard that was emitting a golden light gradually withdrew its own brilliance and returned to a slightly plain appearance. Of course, it was plain, but that was only compared to the brilliance from before. Even if its brilliance was withdrawn, the scabbard still looked like it was made of luxurious gems, making it impossible for people to ignore its existence. Looking carefully, Noah realized that the scabbard in his hand was different from ordinary scabbards. At least, ordinary scabbards were definitely not as peculiar as the one in Noah's hand. It was mainly gold and blue, wide at the top and pointed at the bottom. With one look, one could tell that it could not be used to carry ordinary swords. To be honest, Noah did not understand why Gaia and Alea gave him a scabbard. Because, wasn't a scabbard generally used to hold swords? However, this scabbard looked very unusual. It should have some kind of special power, right? The moment he thought of this, Noah's head buzzed, and a large amount of information began to appear in his mind, becoming Noah's memories. These were the necessary knowledge and information that Gaia and Alea had instilled into Noah. If Noah had received these memories before going to the world of absolute dual blades, it would have taken a long time even if he could bear it. But after going to the world of absolute dual blades, and obtaining the Daybreak Star rune 4 times in total in the world of absolute dual blades, Noah, whose spirit had been strengthened a lot, was able to accept this memory much more easily. It took him almost a minute to finish accepting it. Among them, there was some information about this world on the surface, and there were also some records about the secret and mysterious side of this world. From these memories, Noah obtained a lot of information. In summary, the general aspects could be summarized into 2 points. 1. This was a world similar to the Black Bullet and Absolute Dual Blades. The similar here did not refer to the fact that there were primitive animals wreaking havoc in this world, or that there was a hidden school. Instead, it referred to the culture and civilization of this world. It could even be said that it was completely the same modern world. 2. Similar to the Absolute Dual Blades, this world also had an inner world. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary modern world. However, in this world, there were also existences similar to surpassers and God's destroyers that surpass humans. Moreover, compared to the Absolute Dual Blades world, this world's inner world was more mysterious, more magnificent, and more dangerous. In addition, Noah also knew the true form of the scabbard in his hand. So that's how it is. After receiving all the memories, Noah looked at the scabbard in his hand with some surprise. Is this the so-called noble phantasm? The so-called noble phantasm referred to those who were once active in myths and legends and transformed into a kind of weapon called heroic spirit that was used by those who were once active in myths and legends. That was the ultimate weapon that originally only existed in fantasy and could only be used by its owner. It had miraculous power. However, there were some noble phantasms that existed in this world in a real form. The scabbard in Noah's hand was one of them. Not only that, among all the noble phantasms, the scabbard in Noah's hand was also one of the best. Normal noble phantasms could not be compared to this scabbard. Only a very small number of noble phantasms could be compared to this scabbard. Otherwise, as the will of the planet and the will of mankind, Gaia and Alea would not have transformed it and made Noah its owner and use it. Therefore, even from Noah's point of view, the power of this scabbard was extremely huge, and its use was incomparably great. With it, as long as Noah had enough magic, then he basically did not have to worry about his own safety. Originally, if he wanted to use the real power hidden in this scabbard, he would need the magic of the original owner of the scabbard. But now the owner of this scabbard had become Noah. Besides Noah's magic, even its original owner had no way to use it. At this moment, Noah slightly unsealed the magic sealed in his body, which was in a limited state, and mobilized the magic sealed in the scabbard. The scabbard also had the characteristic of storing its owner's magic. As long as he poured magic into it, even if he did not use it, the scabbard would be able to store the magic and use it at any time. At that time, even if Noah did not have any magic, as long as the scabbard still had magic stored in it, he would be able to use the power of the scabbard. Furthermore, the scabbard would be able to act on its own. However, just as Noah was pouring magic into the scabbard in his hand, Noah's superb perception suddenly caught a fluctuation. And Noah was slightly surprised, and then he discovered it. This forest. No, it should be said that it was this city. The air in this city was thick. The city seemed to be shrouded in a layer of invisible fog. This layer of invisible fog reacted when Noah unsealed the magic in his body. Barrier. Relying on his sensing ability and the memory in his mind, Noah recognized the true form of this layer of invisible fog. This city is actually completely covered by a barrier? After a while, the somewhat surprised Noah frowned and put his unsealed magic back into the limited state. Then in a flash, he hid behind a tall tree on the side. Pa 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 pa. At the same time, the sound of birds flapping their wings resounded in the air above the forest. A flock of about 10 to 20 birds flew in from the other side of the forest, constantly hovering in the air above the forest. Hiding behind the tree, Noah stared at the flock of birds hovering in the air above the forest. This was not an ordinary flock of birds. From Noah's perception, these birds did not have any breath of life, and they even carried a small amount of magic. Previously, the barrier covering this city had reacted to Noah's magic after he unsealed the limited state. Therefore, these birds should have been sent by the owner of the barrier to investigate. This allowed Noah to discover another use of the limited state concealment. Like Noah's own magic, if he used the limited state to seal it, there seemed to be no way to detect it. Pa 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 pa. The sound of the birds flapping their wings still echoed in the air above the forest. After an unknown amount of time, the flock of birds hovering in the air above the forest turned around and flew back to their original location. Noah, who was hiding behind the tree, walked out, raised his eyes, and looked in the direction of the flock of birds. After a long time he chuckled. It seems that this city also has many secrets. Following these words, the scabbard in Noah's hand turned into rays of light and merged into Noah's body. Chapter 284. Sanio City. This was the name of the city covered by the barrier. After coming out of the forest and arriving at the city center, Noah walked around aimlessly while seemingly unintentionally conversing with the passers-by. In the end, he obtained some basic information about the city. How should he describe it? Originally, Noah thought that this city called Sanio City was special, but when he entered the city center, he discovered that Sanio City was actually just a rural town that was being developed. It was close to the mountains and was surrounded by mountains like a basin. It could not be considered flourishing because it was originally just a small town in the countryside. It was only 10 years ago that it began to modernize and develop at a high level. Therefore, if one had to say what was special about Sanio City, it would probably be that while it kept the forests, suburbs, hills, and fields, it was also gradually urbanizing. This made it not comparable to a big city, but it did not fall behind. It could be considered a city that was developing at a moderate level. Of course, this was the point of view of the residents of Sanio City. However, Noah, who was walking on the streets of Sanio City, could clearly feel the true uniqueness of this city. There was an extremely large amount of magic flowing under the city. In the past, Noah had only sensed this type of large amount of magic flowing through the earth in one place. Heavenly Wolf Island. The island where the first president, Mavis Viamilio, had an extremely large amount of magic under the ground, just like Sanio City. It is because of this large amount of magic under the ground that Sanio City is covered by a barrier, right? According to Noah's senses, there were roughly 2 enchantments in Mayo City. One was the barrier that reacted to Noah's magic and seemed to have the ability to detect magic. The other was the barrier that managed the magic in the ground and controlled its flow, making the magic flow in a certain direction. Following his senses, Noah, who was immersed in the sea of people on the streets, raised his head and looked at a mountain in the distance. The magic in Sanio City was flowing there. It seems that this piece of land is the so-called spirit vein. Noah, who was staring at the mountain, sighed after a while. Moreover, it's a spirit vein with a manager. The knowledge he obtained from Gaia and Alea about this world allowed Noah to know one of the mysteries that existed in this world magic. That is the general term for the artificial reappearance of mystery and miracles. To put it simply, Noah's crushing magic was also considered magic in this world. Although there were some differences between the two, they both used a person's own power to drive the magic in their body to display a mysterious and miraculous power. However, in this world, there was a huge difference between magic and magic. Generally speaking, Noah's crushing magic could only be called crushing magic in this world, not magic. In this world, individuals who could use magic were not called sorcerers but magicians. In Sano City, there was at least one magician. Therefore, this land that was filled with a large amount of magic power was covered with a barrier. After all, if the large amount of mana in the ground was used well, it would be of great help and benefit to a magician in various aspects. Controlling such a piece of land, who wouldn't set up some defensive measures against outsiders, and who wouldn't want to obtain this piece of land? Perhaps, the manager of this land had already determined that an outsider magician had arrived when the barrier had reacted to Noah's magic power. Moreover, it was very likely that they had made the decision to attack the enemy. However, at this time, the manager of this land should be very confused, right? This was because the magic power that had caused the barrier to react had already disappeared. Noah had once again used the power of restriction to seal it in his body, concealing its traces. Even Noah himself didn't think that under the state of restriction, there was no way to sense or detect it, let alone other people. Let's play hide and seek for the time being. After sealing all of his magic power in restriction, even his physical strength and other aspects of his body were all restriction, leaving behind only the strength of an ordinary person. Noah smiled. After all, I also need some time to settle down. Next, Noah began to settle down in Sano City. Every time he arrived in a new world, the most difficult thing to solve was the problem of identity. Every time Noah arrived in a new world, he had to solve the problem of his identity first. Just like in the world of absolute dual blades, Noah originally wanted to find an internet cafe and hack into the country's database to leave his personal information. Then he would use the excuse of loss to apply for a new identity card and household registration. However, Sano City's modern urbanization had only been going on for about 10 years. At this time, even mobile phones weren't that common, let alone computers. Noah went through a lot of trouble to borrow a computer from a large company. In exchange for helping the employee who borrowed the computer bring takeout, he borrowed about 10 minutes to successfully hack into the country's database and leave his personal information. Then, Noah began to think of ways to get some money. There was no other way. In this world, there was no place like Haolang Academy that provided free food and accommodation. If he didn't think of a way to get some money, he was afraid that Noah wouldn't even have a place to stay for the night. Even getting food to eat was a problem. As for the living expenses he accumulated in Absolute Dual Blades, when he left Absolute Dual Blades, Noah secretly transferred all of them to Ivan's account. Compared to Noah, Ivan, who had to revitalize his family business, needed money more. Moreover, if Noah wanted to make money, he had many ways. In the world of fairy tale, Noah started to accept commissions when he was 11 or 12 years old, and went out to work to earn money. In the world of Pitch Black Bullet, in order to create fairy tale. In the first year, Noah also thought of all kinds of ways to make money. For Noah, making money was not a difficult thing. As long as he wanted to, he could find a way to make money in minutes. At the very least, he could go underground and fight. He could even use his sensory ability to gamble a few times. That way, money would not be easy to come by. At this time, Noah, who was walking on a street, turned his head and looked at the other side of the street. On the busy street, a figure gradually passed through the crowd and entered Noah's sight. It was a young girl with waist-length black hair and a pair of pale eyes. She was wearing a student uniform from who knows where. The girl's delicate face was tense. Her pale eyes were full of awe. Her walking posture was like a tiger. Her every move was clean and neat, without the slightest superfluous movement. Her waist-length black hair swayed. As if with a bit of magic, she slowly walked in the direction of Noah. Of course, the target of such a beautiful girl with such a strong presence and delicate appearance was not Noah. As if already accustomed to other people's gazes, the girl did not even look at Noah. She simply brushed past Noah, passed by Noah, and walked to the other side of the street. With his back facing the young lady who was gradually walking into the distance, Noah's dark and deep eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. He immediately smiled, turned around and actually followed a short distance behind the young lady. He hung behind the young lady and began to follow her. The first place the girl went to was the outskirts of the forest. Yes, forest. Moreover, it was the forest that Noah had arrived in when he first came to this world. Looking at the girl's serious face as she walked around in various places in the forest, as if she was investigating something, Noah's eyes became more and more thoughtful, and finally a smile appeared. After an unknown amount of time, the girl did not seem to have discovered anything, which made the girl's delicate face show a bit of unwillingness and displeasure, and left the forest. Next, the girl went to Miyazaki in Miyazaki City. After climbing up the hill that was paved with asphalt, and climbing up the steep slope, the girl arrived in front of a building. Without any hesitation, the girl directly walked in, and then did not come out again. Noah, who was following behind, had already stopped. He turned his head and looked at a door tablet next to the building. On it was written Private Third Grade High School. Third grade high school? Noah first muttered to himself for a while, then smiled, turned around, and walked back the way he came. Chapter 285. Private Mitsubishi High School. This was a school that had existed in Myomachi before Myomachi was developed into a modern city. Before that, Mitsubishi High School was just a dilapidated school built on a mountain. It closed down 20 years ago. And then a new school building was built and became the current private Mitsubishi High School. As one of the few private high schools in Mitsubishi City, although the number of students studying in Mitsubishi High School was not many, it was definitely not few. However, most of the students were not residents of Mitsubishi Town. It could be said that students from all over Mitsubishi City were mixed in, making it quite lively. At this time, in the student union office of Mitsubishi High School, such an episode was quietly happening. Transfer student? Wearing the girl's uniform of Mitsubishi High School, a girl with waist-length black hair and pale eyes raised her head in surprise and looked at the boy in front of her. It was a boy of the same age as the girl. He had a head of messy but stylish hair. His face was very handsome, but his eyes and actions had a kind of rough feeling. At first glance, he looked like a playboy. Looking at the boy standing in front of her with a frown, the girl asked casually without being serious or perfunctory. It's really rare. There's actually a transfer student. Mitsubishi City could not be considered a big city, let alone Mitsubishi Town. Under such circumstances, there was actually a transfer student who transferred to Mitsubishi High School. No wonder the girl asked. After all, the girl was the student union president of Mitsubishi High School. The boy in front of the girl was the vice president of the student union of Mitsubishi High School. However, as the vice president, the boy did not have the slightest courtesy to the president in front of him, and his tone was still rough. President Ouchie, do you think it's necessary for me to joke at this time? Indeed, if it were you, you would definitely not be willing to use this rare time to joke with me. The girl called President Ouchie did not care about the vice president's rough tone at all, as if she did not care about the other party's existence at all. But it's really rare, Mr. Vice President. You actually care about whether a transfer student transferred to Mitsubishi High School? I don't want to waste such time talking about transfer students. The vice president's rough tone became a little distressed. The problem is that my old man told me to take good care of the transfer student when he was at home this morning. Hearing this, the girl was truly surprised. Sushi Iris Pill. That was the vice president in front of the girl. Putting aside whether or not he was a hedonistic son of rich parents, his family was indeed quite wealthy. Needless to say, the chairman of the board of directors of Mitsui High School was Suzy Haramaru's father. In other words, as the father of Sasaki Haramaru, the chairman of the board of directors of Mitsuru High School personally instructed his son to take care of the transfer students today. It was hard to say if a transfer student could even alert the chairman, let alone get the chairman to personally instruct them to take care of him. This made the girl finally feel curious. What kind of background does this transfer student have? That better be the case, Suzy Uamaru said, as if he didn't know what to say. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth my time. Hearing this, the young girl also began to lose interest. You're really cold, but that's also your style. For you, it's important to know whether someone has value or not. If they don't have a background, then they have no value. Saying that you're wasting time is indeed something you would say. We're the same, President Ouchie. Suzy Haramaru retorted. I've said everything I need to say. I just want to say that later, after the transfer student completes the admission procedures, he will come to the student union to say hello. Don't treat someone you don't know as someone who's pursuing you like before, and give him a kick without hesitation. There's something wrong with what you just said, the young girl casually replied. I'll only make a move on someone who's clingy. Otherwise, I'm too lazy to waste my energy. That's why we're the same. Suzy Haramaru glanced at the girl without saying anything else. It was almost as if someone had calculated the time, and the sound of knocking on the door began. Only then did the girl raise her head and exchange a glance with Suzy Haramaru. Then, she turned her gaze to the door. Please come in. As soon as the voice fell, the door of the student union office was directly pushed open. The girl and Suzy Haramaru both looked at the person who came in. What entered the eyes of the two was a young man. A young man with short black hair, dark eyes that were as deep as the stars, exuding a strange temperament and a free and easy aura that made people unable to move their eyes away. The person who came in was Noah. Glancing around the entire student union office, Noah's eyes and the girl's eyes met in an instant. At this moment, the corner of Noah's mouth slowly rose. At this moment, the girl's heart seemed to be touched, and she stared at Noah for a while. The touched here was not referring to love at first sight, or anything like that. It was all pink and unfolding. The reason why the girl's heart was touched was because the girl inexplicably felt like she was being stared at by something dangerous. And the switch that represented vigilance in her heart was suddenly turned on. When the girl's eyes were also filled with vigilance, Noah looked away and greeted. Hello, I'm today's transfer student. My name is Noah Doria. You can call me Noah. Noah Doria. Suzy Haramaru slightly raised her eyes. This name, Don't tell me you're not from this country. Yes, Noah admitted straightforwardly. I'm not from this country. A foreign transfer student. The girl's sharp eyes stared at Noah's body, as if she was staring at a dangerous person, and her words were also merciless. A foreign transfer student will also take a fancy to our rural city's private high school? Sensing that her president's tone was very unfriendly, Susie Haramaru immediately closed her mouth tightly, and at the same time, a feeling of surprise surged in her heart. As long as one was a student of Mitsuhiko High School, there was no one who did not know how violent this girl was. She was always ruthless to others. Even if it was a teacher, if they made a mistake, she would directly rush up to correct them. Her temper was not bad, but her patience was very limited. In addition, her eyes were always fierce. So Susie Haramaru was not surprised at all that the girl would be so rude to a person she met for the first time. However, the girl's current behavior had already exceeded the category of rude, and began to transition in the direction of finding fault with the innocent. In this regard, Susie Haramaru did not want to comment on anything, nor did he want to meddle in other people's business. He did not want to become the victim of the president who was inexplicably unhappy and needed to vent her anger. Actually, I just came to Mitsuhiko City by chance. I didn't want to transfer to Mitsuhiko High School, but I happened to meet the president of this school. Noah, as if he did not notice the unfriendliness in the girl's eyes and tone, straightforwardly explained. When I met the president yesterday, he was playing chess with others. I just happened to be interested, so I played 2 games. Later, I found out that there was a bet. After I finished, the president had already lost a lot of money to me. When he knew that I was looking for a school to enter, he warmly invited me here. Noah's words were half true and half false. The truth was naturally that Noah did not come to Mitsuhiko City on purpose, and he did not have the intention to transfer to Mitsuhiko High School. The lie was that Noah had a purpose to find the president of Mitsuhiko High School. Everything that happened after that was logical, and it was all true. The only difference was whether it was intentional or not. As for the purpose of transferring to Mitsuhiko High School, it was very simple. Because the girl was a student here. Because the girl was very special. Facing Noah's words, the girl was directly stunned. Even the girl was like this. Susie Haramaru fell into a dead silence, as if he had swallowed a bug. So his father told him to take care of this transfer student, because he lost money to her? Well, no matter what, we are all classmates. Noah said to the girl with a smile. You haven't asked. The girl took a deep breath and looked at Noah with a stern gaze. I am the president of Mitsuhiko High School's Student Council, Aoko Aozaki. This was the first meeting between Noah and Aoko Aozaki. Chapter 286. Due to the need to go through the admission procedures, Noah came to Mitomi High School very early, so that there was still a lot of time left after the admission procedures were completed. At this time, students began to spread out in every corridor. Some stood at the door and gathered in 2s and 3s to chat. Some entered the classroom alone and played with their companions. Every corridor of Sandan High School was filled with the existence called vitality. Accompanied by the president and vice president of the Student Union of Mitomi High School, Noah almost walked through the entire Mitomi High School. Raza Haramaru, who was next to him, introduced the places to Noah with a very rude and lazy tone. Aoko had been silent. To some extent, it could be said that she had been staring at Noah fiercely. It was as if she wanted to see the true face of a hypocrite, causing many students passing by to whisper and cast sympathetic eyes on Noah. The president of the Student Union of Mitomi High School was not to be trifled with. This was something that everyone knew. The students thought that Noah had offended Aoko and was targeted by her. This was why they cast sympathetic eyes on Noah. But they did not know that the situation should be the opposite. It was not Aoko who targeted Noah, but Noah who targeted Aoko. Otherwise, Noah would not suddenly transfer to Mitomi High School. Of course, Noah naturally would not show this. He ignored Aoko's gaze and chatted with Raza Haramaru as usual, turning a blind eye to her. This made Raza Haramaru's hair stand on end. For Aoko, Raza Haramaru wanted to stay away from her. now that the other party was releasing a murderous gaze next to him. Even if the target was not him, it was enough to make Raza Harumaru tremble with fear. As for Noah, Raza Harumaru could only admire him now. Only Noah could directly ignore the president of Mitomi High School. However, if he could do it, it did not mean that Raza Harumaru could also do it. At the very least, if Ayako continued to stare at him like this, Masaki Yamara would be the first one to succumb and become a sacrifice. Immediately, Suzy Harumaru tried to change the topic. By the way, Noah, you said that my old man lost a lot of money to you yesterday. How much did he lose? One had to know that Susi Isamura's family was quite wealthy. If he had only lost a small amount of money, the chairman wouldn't have been so enthusiastic about Noah. In fact, this was indeed the case. Not a lot, Noah said in an indifferent tone. His words were earth-shattering. If I were to add it up, it should be around 20 million, right? Suzy Harumaru's legs went soft, and he almost fell to the ground. 20 million? Ayako cried out in surprise, forgetting the inexplicable sense of weariness in her heart. It's over. Sasuke sighed as he facepalmed. That old man is finally finished this time. Suzy's family was indeed quite wealthy. It wouldn't be difficult for them to take out 20 million yuan. The difficult part was that Suzy Harumaru's father lost 20 million yuan in gambling. Suzy Harumaru's father didn't have the final say in the Suzy family. There was still Suzy Harumaru's grandfather above him. If his grandfather were to find out about this, he would most likely fly into a rage. If that happened, Suzy Harumaru's father would be in trouble. Well, don't be so nervous, Noah said casually, as if he was afraid that his words wouldn't scare Suzy Harumaru to death. I'm here as a student. It's not good to gamble. So yesterday's gambling was just for fun. I also told the chairman that I don't have to pay back the money. As soon as this sentence came out, let alone Suzy Harumaru, even Ayako looked at Noah like he was an idiot. That was 20 million yuan. It wasn't 2 million yuan or 200,000 yuan, but 20 million yuan. If it was a family of 3, 200,000 yuan would definitely be enough for the family to live for a month. 2 million yuan would be enough for a year. 20 million yuan was equivalent to 10 years of living expenses for a family of 3. How could he just give up on such a large sum of money? If this person wasn't stupid, then who was? If it can be solved with money, then it's not a problem. Noah responded to Ayako and Suzy Harumaru's silence. I have hands and feet. If I want money, can't I earn it myself? This time, Ayako was somewhat impressed by Noah. That was the logic. But how many people could reject 20 million yuan with just one sentence? If it was Ayako herself, she naturally wouldn't accept the ill-gotten wealth. Although gambling was against the student's code of conduct, there was no reason for her to give away the money that was already in her hands. As expected of a foreigner, you really can't compare to the local snobs. Suzy Harumaru also patted Noah's shoulder and looked very emotional. Now Suzy Harumaru finally understood why his old man asked him to take care of Noah so enthusiastically. It wasn't because Noah was his CR, but because he was indebted to Noah. He saved him from being scolded by his grandfather. Okay, it's almost time for class. I should go. Ayako rolled up her sleeves and looked at the time on her watch. Then she waved her hand at Suzy Harumaru. Vice President, I'll leave the transfer student to you. Deal with him. After leaving behind this sentence, Ayako glanced at Noah. She didn't say anything to Noah and directly walked away. Her handsome figure attracted the attention of the surrounding students as she disappeared at the end of the corridor. Noah looked at Ayoko's back as she left. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Ayako is really interesting. She comes and goes as she pleases. She's like the leader of a group of bad people. Who would have thought that such a person would be the president of the student council? Hey, don't tell me you've taken a fancy to the president. Suzy Harumaru raised his voice slightly when he saw Noah staring at the direction where Ayako disappeared. Although she's a beauty based on her appearance and figure, I advise you to change your target if you want to think about the rest of your life. Noah obviously didn't take a fancy to Ayako. He came here because Ayako was in Mitsui High School, because Noah didn't have a clear goal and there was something special about Ayoko that caught his attention. That was why he decided to enroll in Mitsui High School. Although this was the case, Suzy Haramaru's words still aroused Noah's interest. Why do you say that? Because Ayoko will never take a fancy to stinky boys like us. Suzy Haramaru said matter-of-factly. For that guy, the people in this world are only divided into people who can get along and people who can't get along. There's never a difference between good relationship and bad relationship. If she thinks you can get along, then she will interact with you. If she doesn't think you can get along, then even if she meets you on the street, she may not call you. That's not the most important thing. Suzy Haramaru's face was filled with pain. The most important thing is that that woman never thinks she needs to fall in love. So, as long as you show the slightest inclination to pursue her, she will sweep you into the category of people who can't get along, whether you like it or not. Hearing this, Noah was stunned, then he couldn't help but laugh. Then isn't the president the kind of old woman who is destined to be alone for the rest of her life? No. It should be said that she will position herself as an old woman who will be alone for the rest of her life. Suzy Haramaru was speechless. Undoubtedly, he was quite handsome, but the look in his eyes and the rough tone in his voice made him look like he was spitting saliva, making people not dare to compliment him. So I advise you not to take a fancy to Ayoko. Otherwise no one will be able to save you, no matter what. Okay, don't worry. Noah couldn't help but laugh. I don't like that president, I just think she's a bit special, a bit eye-catching, no other meaning. I can still be saved, right? At least there's no possibility of being sentenced to death. With this sentence as the end of the topic, Suzy Haramaru walked forward. Let's go, you're in the same class as me. We're both 2A, I'll take you there. By the way, after school, I'll treat you to a meal as a thank you for forgiving my old man. Noah couldn't help but smile and nodded. Under the gaze of many students, he followed Suzy Haramaru to the classroom. Chapter 287. Next, in just one day, the owner of the name Noah Dole became a celebrity in the entire Mitsubishi High School. High school students were the age when they liked gossip and rumors the most. Therefore, regarding the transfer student who came to Mitsubishi High School today, in just one day, all the men and women in Mitsubishi High School, including the teachers, knew his name. There was no other way. Noah made a lot of legends that people talked about enthusiastically during the day at Mitsubishi High School. In the first class, the classroom teacher seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for Noah by repeatedly testing him. As a result, not only did Noah answer all the questions correctly, he even asked several wrong questions in the class as revenge, making the teacher who was deliberately making things difficult for him flee as soon as the class was over, as if he had been granted amnesty. After that, people found out that the teacher had just been scolded by the chairman in the morning. Knowing that the chairman seemed to have some preference for the new transfer student, he vented his anger on Noah and deliberately made things difficult for Noah. During the lunch break, when his classmates surrounded Noah and asked him all kinds of things curiously, the chairman personally came to the classroom. Not only did he ask about Noah's well-being and care, but he also seemed to know that Noah did not bring a lunchbox today. He specially brought a lunchbox for Noah, so that he could enjoy a rather luxurious lunch. These two things alone were enough for Noah to make a name for himself. Who would have thought that there would be another incident that was quite big for the students after school? That was, some seniors thought that Noah was in the limelight too much. After school, they blocked Noah, who was going home, and took him to the back of the sports warehouse. They probably wanted to teach Noah a lesson. However, after a heart-wrenching scream, when some of the students who had witnessed Noah being called away were preparing to carry him to the infirmary, they discovered that the people lying on the ground were not the transfer students who had just arrived today. Instead, they were the upperclassmen who had planned to cause trouble for Noah. Therefore, the rumor that Noah was a person with good grades, good skills, good character, and good personality, but definitely not a person to be trifled with, flew everywhere and spread throughout Mitsubishi High School. Under such circumstances, it was difficult for Noah not to be famous. And Noah himself was quite enjoying this kind of life, After all, in the world of fairy tale, Noah did not go to school. In the world of Black Bullet, in order to teach the children, Noah picked up a pointer and became a teacher himself. In the world of Absolute Dual Blades, although he was considered to have gone to school, more than 70% of the lessons were combat skills training. Who could say that it was an ordinary school life? Therefore, for this really ordinary school life, even if it was impossible to maintain it, Noah still had the idea of enjoying it day by day, even if he had finished the university courses. However, thanks to this, Noah easily found a job as a tutor. With a salary of 30,000 yen per hour, he taught the children homework and also taught the children how to play the piano. When it was dark, Noah had already earned nearly 100,000 yen. Many of Noah's classmates were also working. Among them, the highest salary was 5,000 yen per day. If the people in the class knew that Noah spent 3 hours to earn nearly 100,000 yen, they would probably cry. Therefore, Noah also said that with his ability, earning money was not too easy. With this money, Noah could finally find a decent place to live. By the way, last night, the place where Noah stayed was a hotel room that the chairman, who was almost moved to tears, patted his chest and found for him. Myo City, Myo Town, an apartment. Q. After a busy day, Noah laid on the bed and let his body sink deep into the quilt. His mind was immersed in his own body. At this time the scabbard, which was blooming with golden brilliance, was quietly suspended in Noah's body. The scabbard was filled with Noah's magic, so the power inside the scabbard was ready to be squandered and used on its master's body. This was the state of the scabbard when it existed in the form of concept. In this state, the scabbard could be buried in anyone's body at will. Originally, Noah had thought that the magical power he had poured into the scabbard would also trigger a reaction from the barrier within Sanyo City. However, what surprised Noah was that the magical power stored in the scabbard was actually the same as the power that had been restricted. There was no way for it to be detected or sensed. Noah, who knew what kind of power the scabbard had, was relieved to store a large amount of magic in the scabbard. His own power was all sealed with the ability to limit, so he only had the level of an ordinary person. Touching his chest, Noah stared at the ceiling, and the appearance of the Myo High School's student council president with a unique personality appeared in his mind. Ayoko Aozaki, there was indeed something special about that girl who acted alone. Because in Ayoko Aozaki's body, Noah could clearly sense the existence of magic. Yes, magic. In other words, Ayoko Aozaki was a magician. Moreover, it was very likely that she was the manager of Myo City's spirit vein. Of course, although this was barely enough to attract Noah's attention, it was not to the point that Noah needed to go to Myo High School. What really interested Noah was that he felt a trace of familiarity from Ayoko Aozaki's body. It was the same feeling he had when he entered this world, when he was pulled over by Gaia and Aleya. It was the same feeling he had when he met Gaia and Aleya in that snowy white world. This made Noah curious. Even if Noah had not seen other magicians, Noah knew that this was not a characteristic that all magicians had. How could an ordinary magician have the feeling of being directly related to the place where Gaia and Aleya were located? Therefore, Noah entered Myo High School in order to find out more about Ayoko Aozaki's background. Maybe I can get something from Ayoko Aozaki's body. Thinking this, Noah directly got up. Why don't I go test it out? After making this decision, Noah got up and walked out of the room. In the forest on the outskirts of Myo City. This was the forest at the junction of Myo Maki and Myo Mound. It was also the first place Noah had arrived in this world when he arrived yesterday. Returning to this forest, the cold air of the night was enough to cause frostbite on a person's skin. The low panting of wild beasts still faintly reverberated. It was believed that no one would be willing to come to such a hair-raising, dangerous forest. However, no one came also meant that the concealment was strong. If one wanted to do something that could not be exposed, such a place was the real treasure. Noah, who was wrapped in a thick black coat and buried his face in the hat of the black coat, slowly walked into the forest and arrived at the place where he had arrived yesterday. Then, Noah began to release the dormant mana in his body bit by bit. After releasing about 1/10 of it, he stopped. Wong! The surrounding air immediately trembled, reacting to Noah's mana. However, what reacted to Noah's mana was not the air, but something in the air. A barrier. A barrier that covered the entire Mayo City. Under the influence of the barrier of Mayo City, Noah's position was instantly exposed. This time Noah did not leave. He quietly stayed in place, a bright light flashing through his eyes. Let me see the difference between a magician and a high mage in this world, Aoko Aozaki. Unfortunately, Noah could only achieve half of this idea. The other half. Whoosh! A gust of wind mixed with cold air blew through the forest. Rustle! The sound of leaves swaying echoed. After waiting for an unknown amount of time in the cold wind, Noah slowly raised his face that was buried in the hat of the black coat, and looked forward. Rustle, rustle! This time, it was not the sound of leaves swaying. It was the sound of footsteps. In the dusky forest, a figure was slowly walking towards them. At the same time, in the air of the forest, a melodious song gradually appeared, like an echo that constantly lingered. It was the figure singing a song that could summon death. Then, under Noah's gaze, the owner of the figure gradually approached. Chapter 288. In the air, a melodious song was lingering. From the song that lingered in the air, Noah sensed a magic that could not be ignored. It made him straighten his body that was still in a relaxed state. His eyes that were hidden under the hat of his black coat also became sharp. However, when Noah saw the full appearance of the person who came, his sharp eyes immediately froze, and were filled with surprise. Sha-sha! Amidst the clear sound of footsteps, the one who walked out from the shadows of the trees, and into the bright moonlight, was a petite and delicate girl. Looking at the girl who was slowly revealing her appearance under the moonlight, even Noah could not help but hold his breath. Because the girl under the moonlight was too beautiful. It was an existence that could make people think of a doll. Her slender limbs were so weak that it seemed like they could be broken with a little force. Her skin that was exposed under the moonlight was pale and lifeless. The girl had shoulder-length black hair that was darker than the night. She was wearing the same black fur coat. She was wearing a black snow hat on her head. She was wearing snow boots. Even her hands were wearing pitch-black gloves. She was like a witch that was born from the night. Her entire body was filled with a magical charm. What left the deepest impression was not only the girl's delicate doll-like face and figure, but also those eyes that seemed to have shed all emotions, shielding herself from the world, as if she had completely transcended the mortal world. That pair of eyes were equally dark and deep, without any emotion in them. However, under the moonlight, the girl who was like a doll, and a witch was still so beautiful that it was suffocating. If it was someone else, even if they were a woman like the girl, they would definitely be stunned. Unfortunately, Noah had seen Lasana's playfulness and cuteness, Myra's rude and unreasonable personality, the Son of Heaven's dignity and holiness, Lilith's arrogance and confidence, and Julie's slender beauty that was like a doll in front of him. This allowed Noah to successfully break free from the suffocating beauty. However, Noah was still surprised. The person who came was not Aoko Aozaki? Could it be that Aoko Aozaki was not the manager of Sanayo City's spirit vein? At this moment, the young lady came to a halt and stared at Noah with emotionless eyes. His gaze was as if he was looking at a large moving object. In the next second, a clear voice that was almost the same as the voice that was fluctuating in the air sounded from the girl's mouth. "We don't accept uninvited guests." The voice was 1,000 miles away. It should not only be because the girl saw Noah as an intruder, but also because the girl herself was synonymous with indifference. Noah glanced vaguely at the dark-skinned, delicate girl. He purposely spoke in a hoarse voice, pretending to be a middle-aged man. "So, little girl, you want to use your rights as the master to drive me away?" The dark-skinned girl raised her eyes slightly. After staring at Noah for a while, she spoke in a voice that was so calm that it was strange. "If you want to stay and play." As the words fell, the black clothes on the girl's body moved as if there was no wind, slowly swaying up and down. At this moment, a power that caused the cold flow in the forest and the low temperature in the air to stagnate gushed out from the girl's body, like a burning gas, rising from the girl's body. As if even the moon was trembling, the bright moon in the sky hid in the dark clouds, converging the moonlight, turning the entire forest into a world of darkness. Even so, the girl's dark eyes still flashed in the night, and her slender body rolled with a power that could make gorillas and black bears, who were many times bigger than the girl, flee in panic. That was the magic that belonged to the girl. It was also the girl's warning. I want to drink a cup of warm black tea before going to sleep. The dark girl closed her eyes and made a final declaration. In order to have that kind of time, I don't want to play the game for too long. Can you leave by yourself? Noah narrowed his eyes as he sensed the magic and hostility rising from the pitch-black young lady. In the end, he uttered those words. I also don't want to play games with a little girl. The dark girl was silent for a moment, and when her voice sounded again, it contained a coldness that could freeze one's heart. Is that so? The air suddenly froze. The girl suddenly opened her eyes as if countless invisible chains suddenly shot out from the space around Noah, firmly binding Noah's body. Noah only felt his body suddenly tighten, and an indescribable restraint came without any warning, nailing Noah on an invisible cross, depriving him of the control of his body. Noah's eyes focused, and he felt that his body didn't belong to him at this moment, and he couldn't move at all. Looking up, Noah could clearly see the changes in the dark girl's expression. In the dark night, one of the pair of dark eyes that was darker than the darkness completely turned into an ominous bright red. That color was more intense than the eyes of the cursed child when he released his power, and it was the color of blood. That is, Noah looked straight at the bright red eye. Magic eye. Magic eye. The ability to change the passive function of the eyes to actively affect the outside world, and to project magic through the line of sight, was called the magic eye. In other words, it was the ability to directly turn the eyes into bullets and bullets. Bullets were magic. A magician who could use the magic eye could rely on the magic eye to affect all targets within their line of sight. As long as the target was caught by the magic eye, they would be trapped in the opponent's magic. It was a magic that was completely impossible to guard against. Therefore, having the magic eye was the proof of being a first-class magician. The girl in front of him, who looked younger than Noah, was already top-notch in terms of her ability as a magician. It's really surprising. The dark-skinned young lady with one black and one red eyes said these words with an expressionless face. Undoubtedly, even a third-rate magician would not do such a thing to look directly at my eyes after knowing that it was the magic eye. The magic eye was the ability to cast magic on the opponent through the line of sight. Of course, looking directly at the eyes of a magician with the magic eye would not only increase the risk of being caught by the magic eye at any time, but it would also make the power of the magic eye more unrestrained on the opponent, making the power of the magic eye even stronger. Clearly knowing the power of the magic eye, an excellent magician would not directly look at the opponent. However, Noah did so. Therefore, the dark girl should be really surprised. But whether she was surprised by Noah's audacity, or surprised by Noah's behavior that was worse than a third-rate magician's, she did not know. So this is the magic eye. Noah used all his strength, but was unable to move even a little bit. His entire body, except for his blood and organs, should not be able to move anywhere else. It seems that the dark girl's magic eye was to ensure that the opponent's life was at a minimum, and at the same time to restrain the opponent, making it impossible for the opponent to escape. To deal with the magic eye, the simplest method was to escape the opponent's line of sight. And to break free from the magic eye, there was also the simplest and most violent method. Instantly squander a large amount of magic power that was more powerful than the opponent's magic eye. Noah had nothing, the most magic power. Pung! In an instant, a violent storm of magic power erupted from Noah's body, like a storm spreading out. The dark girl's pupils shrank, and she immediately retreated. Dong! The magic power turned into a shockwave, blowing away all the leaves and branches around Noah. Pung! As if something had broken, Noah's body emitted a clear cracking sound, And immediately, Noah's body regained its freedom. "What a fierce little girl," Noah deliberately said in a hoarse voice, laughing out loud. "It is impolite not to reciprocate." After saying this, Noah raised his hand, and the torrential magic power immediately retracted back into Noah's body. Seeing this, the dark girl's expressionless face finally showed a trace of seriousness. Chapter 289. A second ago, the forest was still raging with wind, but now it suddenly became calm. However, in the air, an extremely oppressive feeling spread out like a sticky swamp, firmly pressing down on the entire forest. Her sharp battle instincts made the pitch-black girl realize the true terror of her opponent. Therefore, the pitch-black girl had reason to believe, in the next second, it would be her time of death. Looking at the black-clothed person who raised his hand high above his head, emitting a dangerous aura, the pitch-black girl took a light breath, and the hand hidden under the pitch-black shawl moved. Ding-ling! In the midst of a bell-like sound, the pitch-black girl took out a dangling, cat-shaped bell that seemed to be made of glass or gemstones. Ding-ling! Releasing the slender fingers that were holding the cat bell, the pitch-black girl let the glass-like cat bell in her hand fall to the ground. Immediately, the cat bell that fell to the ground seemed to sink into the water. The ground was like a splash of water, and in a series of ripples, it seemed to have fallen into the water and disappeared there. Looking at this scene with his own eyes, Noah frowned in confusion. His superb sensing ability told Noah that the cat bell that seemed to have sunk into water and disappeared on the ground seemed to have some kind of function that couldn't be seen on the surface. "Build it up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Build it up with wood and clay, my fair lady." At this moment a light, bell-like song came from the ground, and in a flash, it spread over the entire forest. That song was completely different from the one that accompanied the girl's appearance at the beginning. At the very least, Noah had a creepy feeling, as though he was being stared at by an invisible eye at the moment the ballad was played. Without the slightest hesitation, Noah gave up the idea of condensing magic, intending to launch a large-scale crush, and directly raze this place to the ground. He jumped back, and retreated explosively. Rumble! In the same second, the ground where Noah was just standing suddenly shook as if it had exploded. Not only did it crack, but it also directly protruded like a volcanic eruption. "Wood and clay will wash away, falling down, falling down. Build it up with bricks and mortar, my fair lady." As the melodious song reverberated in the air, the earth began to tremble. The pitch-black girl expressionlessly closed her eyes, and as if she was whispering before sleep, she softly called out, "Come, it's your turn, Bridge." Her voice, as soon as she finished speaking, "Woo," as if it directly sounded from the distant ancient times. A long sound that represented a long history came from the ground, and the sound shook the air. Kacha-kacha. The trees behind the pitch-black girl's back, and the ground also accelerated and constantly collapsed and destroyed. Woo! After a long roar, a true monster appeared behind the pitch-black girl. Pung! Pushing the earth and squeezing the ground. It was a monster that seemed to be unable to take shape, and just its upper body alone was more than 8 meters tall. Tree roots like blood vessels covered its whole body, and it was filled with the traces of time. Stones became its muscles. Trees formed its body. Countless branches spread out on its surface, and a huge bridge-like arm was raised high, covering the sky. His vision was completely filled by the giant that covered the sky. Noah looked at the giant that let out a long roar with a dumbfounded expression, and was extremely stunned. Noah had seen existences that were more exaggerated than the giant in front of him. Not to mention others. If Makarov used gigantification to the limit, then in a flash, he could transform into a giant that was bigger than an island. In the world of Black Bullet, Scorpio in Stage V, Zodiac, was hundreds of thousands of meters tall. Compared to those two, the giant in front of him was like a child. However, from the memories obtained from Gaia and Aleia, Noah did not find any information about a magician being able to control such a giant. Could that be a familiar? The so-called demonic servants referred to those who were created by magicians. They were similar to robots, and they existed specifically to help their masters. They were like summoned beasts that could be ordered by their magician masters. Whether it was in daily life or in battle, they were objects that could play a supporting role. It was not strange for a magician to have a familiar. However, when a familiar was created by a magician, although it would be given a part of its master's abilities, it would not have power that was above its master's. Therefore, demonic servants were often used by magicians to solve their daily difficulties. In terms of battle, demonic servants would at most play a supporting role. The giant in front of him could only play a supporting role in battle? Even an idiot would not think so. That was definitely not an ordinary familiar. Bridge. The pitch-black girl's voice was extremely appropriate. Deal with him. The voice was as cold as before, but it could definitely chill anyone's heart. Whoa! The giant that covered the sky let out a long roar that shook the sky. It raised its bridge-like arm, and like a mountain falling from the sky, it rubbed against the chaotic atmosphere, and brought a sharp explosion sound as it fiercely fell in Noah's direction. In an instant, the light from the sky was completely blocked by the fist that fell like a mountain. The shadow of death descending from above made Noah subconsciously tense his body. He raised his head and stared at the giant fist that fell like a meteor, and his heart suddenly moved. A burst of dazzling light rose from Noah's body. In the dazzling light, a golden scabbard appeared in a flash, and then suddenly disintegrated. Wong wong! The fragments of the scabbard were still shining with a golden light, and turned into a crystal-like barrier. When combined together, it was like a protective cover that directly covered Noah's body. Against the extremely dense wind pressure, the giant's fist fell heavily on the barrier, as if it was the end of the world. Dong! A loud and muffled sound that resounded through one's heart rippled out, bringing with it a terrifying shockwave that spread out in all directions. The dark girl's ice-like face changed slightly, and she retreated without thinking. Oh! The frenzied storm swept through every corner of the scene, cutting down trees, blasting stones, and narrowly brushing past the dark girl's body, almost blowing her away. After an unknown amount of time, the frenzied impact wind that wreaked havoc in the forest quietly retreated. After retreating quite a distance, an invisible barrier appeared in front of the pitch-black girl, blocking all of the rubble, wood, and wind. However, it still made the pitch-black girl's emotionless eyes flash with a trace of lingering fear. Under such circumstances, the dark girl was unable to discover it. Just at the side, in a bush that was fortunately not attacked by the impact wind and waves, and could still be more or less intact, two black shadows quietly appeared there. They were two men with a split mouth that was dark all over, and only their mouths were bright red, but they were long enough to touch their ears. Clang! A cold light flashed from the hands of the two fish-mouthed men. The arms of the two fish-mouthed men also turned into two huge kitchen knives, exposing the murderous aura and hostility of the two fish-mouthed men. The dark girl finally noticed that something was wrong, and she turned her head abruptly, looking at the bush on the side. However, at this time, she found that there was no way to stop the murderous maniac hiding in the dark. Whoosh! Almost in the blink of an eye, the two men with a split mouth rushed out like lone wolves, turning into afterimages. The huge murderous weapons in their hands were like fangs, and in the cold light and wind, they mercilessly cut towards the dark girl's head. After understanding the situation, the dark girl's cold, doll-like pretty face suddenly changed. Chapter 290. Clang! A cold light flashed through the air like lightning, cutting toward the defenseless dark-skinned girl. Her dark eyes reflected the image of the sharp kitchen knife that cut through the atmosphere. The dark-skinned girl's doll-like beautiful face suddenly changed, but after a while, she returned to being indifferent and emotionless. It wasn't because the dark-skinned girl found a way to avoid death. The girl just calmly accepted her impending death. Obviously, for the girl, death wasn't worth being afraid of. Was it because the girl was extraordinary and had seen through the world of mortals? Or was it because the girl knew that she would meet such an end sooner or later? This point no one knew, and the two men who had turned into homicidal maniacs clearly didn't want to be merciful because of this. They held sharp kitchen knives, one on the left and one on the right side of the girl, swung their weapons, and like scissors, cut toward the girl's white and slender neck. Woo! Sensing the crisis of its master, the giant let out a wail. Unfortunately, having a huge body also had its disadvantages. Every move required time, and it was quite clumsy. Therefore, the giant could only let out a wail, and only had time to clumsily twist its body. It was impossible for it to rescue the girl. Of course the giant couldn't do it, but it didn't mean that others couldn't. Wang! Below the giant's huge fist that was still on the ground, the space suddenly shook, and flashed with little golden light, as if condensing into a vortex of air, crazily converging. Pung! Immediately, a low muffled sound rang. A figure like a bright golden light suddenly flashed with a long light tail, as if piercing through space, and flashed in front of the dark-skinned girl in an instant. Then the owner of the figure raised his hand, and a gorgeous scabbard that bloomed with golden light suddenly flashed in front of his palm, turning into pieces of crystal, forming a dreamlike protective shield, and shook like a spring. Ding! The two huge kitchen knives, which were strong enough to cut through rocks, fell on the dreamlike protective shield that rose up with a crisp sound, creating a loud noise. Kacha! The protective shield formed by the scabbard didn't even have a trace of crack, and the powerful force on the kitchen knives bounced back, causing the two huge sharp kitchen knives to crack at the same time. Clang! A second later, the two giant kitchen knives broke in half, and spun like a windmill, before disappearing into the forest. Slap! Inside the dreamy protective shield, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the face of one of the men with a split mouth. Wang! A dazzling white light instantly rose from the palm of the hand that was holding the man's face, illuminating the whole body of the man. In the white light, the man's body seemed to have been completely cut into cubes, and white marks appeared on his body. Then such a voice lightly reverberated. Shatter! The dazzling white light surged. Bang! The man with the fissure didn't even have a chance to react. In the loud explosion, his body exploded, turning into fragments that sputtered in all directions. The remaining man with the fissure was trembling all over. Without any hesitation, he turned around and frantically fled to the other side of the forest. However, that would require the consent of the person who controlled his life and death. Woo! Over the entire forest, a long roar that represented anger exploded like thunder. A huge fist, like a falling meteor, rubbed against the atmosphere and fell, heavily smashing into the body of the man with the fisheye who was trying to escape. Bang! The strike that caused the earth to tremble directly buried his opponent. The whole process didn't even take 10 seconds. The two assassins hiding in the dark were killed by Noah and the giant. They didn't feel any pain, and didn't realize their situation before they died. They didn't even have a complete body. Both of them died. The forest returned to peace once again. Wang! The dreamy protective shield turned back into a scabbard shining with golden light, then turned into a little starlight, and returned to Noah's body. Hiss! Noah, who was standing in front of the dark girl, took a deep breath, and a painful expression flashed across his face. One of his feet was still twitching, as if it was extremely painful. It was indeed extremely painful. From the beginning to the end, Noah had only released a tenth of his magic power. The strength of his body was still under the seal of the limit ability, so he was only at the level of an ordinary person. The leap forward was the same as the annihilation strike. It would cause a certain burden to the user's body. Using the leap forward, which would cause a burden to the body, was a normal thing to feel pain. At this time behind Noah, a cold voice with a trace of anger entered Noah's ears. Why? Noah was stunned, then he turned around and looked behind him. There, a young girl in black clothes and a shawl, who was as black as Noah, was looking at Noah with a puzzled expression that he had never seen before. Her red lips parted slightly. Why? The why here was naturally referring to the reason why Noah wanted to save the girl, who was his enemy. The girl felt that Noah was an intruder who wanted to seize the spirit vein of Sani City, so she had the idea of eliminating the intruder, and wanted to kill Noah. And as an intruder who wanted to seize the land, he had no reason to save her. The magicians of this world were not like the sorcerers, who could use magic in the open. In this world, concealment was the essence of magic. The more people knew and used magic, the more the magic's power would be scattered and weakened. Because magic was a power that had already been determined in the origin, the more people knew about it, the weaker its power would be. This was easy to understand. Originally, if the power of 10 was used by one person, the power would be 100% of 10. If 2 people used it, then one person would only be able to use 5, which was only half of the power. The 10, here was the magic's power in the origin. Therefore, in this kind of situation, the more people who used magic, the less power the magicians could get. Therefore, most magicians would do their best to maintain the mystery of their magic. Even if their magic was discovered by ordinary people, magicians would have to eliminate them to maintain the mystery of their magic. Simply put, it was to kill the witnesses. For magicians, killing was definitely not something that they needed to feel guilty about. It was also because of this that most of the battles between magicians were decided by the death of the magician. As long as there was enough reason, even if it was family or friends, magicians would kill each other. As a pure magician, the girl did not understand. Undoubtedly, Noah, who wanted to seize the land of Sani City, had enough reason to kill her and obtain the ownership of the spirit vein of this land. Why would he save her now? Perhaps this also hurt the girl's self-esteem as a magician, so the girl's tone, other than the usual indifference, had a rare emotion. Noah of course knew why the girl had such a question. It was because he knew that Noah snorted. Because I wanted to save you, so I saved you. What is the reason? The eyes hidden under the hat glanced at the girl. Noah did not give the girl a chance to speak and directly said, "Don't use your magician's tricks on me." This sentence made the girl's eyes move slightly. "You're not a magician? At least, I don't admit that I'm the ideal magician in your heart." Noah did not realize that his voice had returned to normal. After throwing out this sentence, he faced the girl. "Today's game will end here. Say hello to Aoko Aozaki for me." The girl's dark eyes suddenly focused. This performance naturally fell into Noah's eyes, causing a look of as expected to appear in Noah's eyes. His figure moved, flashed into the bushes at the side, and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. The girl instinctively wanted to stop Noah, but after realizing that it was meaningless, she closed her mouth and looked at the direction Noah disappeared without saying anything for a long time. Woo! Behind the girl, the giant that covered the sky let out a long roar. Like the fog in winter, it slowly disappeared as if it had never appeared. Chapter 291. Ha! The next morning, after dealing with a group of classmates who were gossiping about Noah defeating a group of seniors yesterday, Noah sat in his seat and yawned. What's wrong? Sitting behind Noah, although he didn't put his feet on the table, Yuan Wan, who was leaning on the back of the chair, removed the book that covered his face and asked in confusion, "Didn't sleep well last night?" "It's okay." Noah yawned and responded casually, "I just slept a little late." Noah's spiritual power had become quite strong after many enhancements. Naturally, he wouldn't feel tired just because he slept a little late. However, Noah didn't just sleep late last night. He also went through a battle in the forest. And after a battle last night, he woke up so leisurely and lazy this morning. It was inevitable that people would want to yawn. Slept late? Yuan Wan raised his eyebrows. You can't be. Looking at Yuan Wan's slightly rough eyes with a trace of filth, Noah didn't even need to think with his knees to know what this young master was thinking. He immediately rolled his eyes. Do you think I'm as playful as you? I just wasted a lot of time, because I went out to work. What do you mean by a playboy? I've never tried that kind of thing before, okay? Itamaru yelled at Noah like he was cursing him. Also, you actually have a job? Of course I have to work. I can't compare to the young master of the chairman's family. Someone sent money into my pocket for me to spend. Noah waved his hand. If you think I'm pitiful, why don't you just throw some money to me? Don't forget, not long ago, you threw away 20 million that could have been in your hands at any time. I can't learn this kind of heroic spirit. Yuan Wan said somewhat lazily. By the way, what kind of job did you find? Tutoring. Noah didn't hide it. Teaching the children in the family And playing the piano. You can play the piano. Itamura looked at Noah in a daze. You're a top student. You can beat my old man in chess. And now you can play the piano. Just tell me what else you know. What else can you do? Noah continued to yawn. Does being proficient in all the languages in the world count? Yuan almost spat out a mouthful of saliva. He couldn't help but abruptly stand up and cry out in disbelief. You're proficient in all the languages of the world. With just one sentence, the noisy classroom immediately quietened down. Just as Noah felt that something was wrong, a commotion erupted in the classroom. Proficient in all the languages of the world. Who? Noah. Really? Hey, you're not trying to show off just to pick up girls, are you? Tell me about it. Let's hear it. The boys and girls in the class immediately squeezed Yuan out and surrounded Noah. They kept chattering, almost making Noah faint. As the vice president Yuan, who was pushed aside as if there was no one else around, had a face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Looking at the group of students jumping around Noah, he could not bear it any longer and shouted out loud, What are you bunch of idiots doing? At the door of the classroom, an angry roar sounded without any warning, directly overshadowing Yuan's voice, and also covering the entire classroom's noise inconceivably. The classroom suddenly fell silent for the second time. This voice, don't tell me it's. When Yuan decisively shut his mouth, the group of students turned their heads in fear and looked in the direction of the classroom door. Then everyone saw it. Although it's not time for class yet, until the bell rings, you have the freedom to arrange your free time. Saying such a sentence, Ayoko stood at the door of the classroom with her arms crossed. She looked like she could endure a little before she exploded, and angrily glared at everyone in the classroom. But didn't anyone tell you that you bunch of idiots are too noisy? The second roar fell, causing the group of students to let out a miserable sound. Not good. The president of the Demon Student Council is going to be angry. We're going to die. Why aren't you running? Wait. For the time being, this is still our classroom. Yes. Even if the president of the student council is in our territory, he has to listen to us. Very good, as expected of our 2A's Bravehearts. Regarding your bravery in challenging the evil spirit, I will definitely spread it throughout the entire Samui High School. You can go in peace. We won't accompany you anymore. You bunch of traitors. Wait for us. Accompanied by such a conversation, in less than a minute, whether it was boys or girls, they all fled like stray dogs. Looking at this exaggerated scene, Noah was almost speechless. Do you dare to be a little more spineless? At this time, Ayoko walked into the classroom as if there was no one around. Under the curious gaze of the group of students who gathered at the door and did not dare to come in, she came in front of Noah and looked down at him condescendingly. Noah, classmate, are you free after school? Ayoko's words made everyone, including Torimaru, open their eyes wide. What does this mean? What? Noah was also slightly startled, but he quickly returned to normal and looked at Ayoko with a smile that was not a smile. Does the president of the student council want to invite me on a date? The rest of the students present all subconsciously held their breaths. Only Ayoko stared at Noah and said in a cold voice, I thought you were slightly different from other boys, but I did not expect you to be the same. Your head is filled with those meaningless things. The implication was that Noah's head was the same as those stinky boys, only lust. Is there anything strange about it? Noah unhurriedly spread out his hands. As a boy, no matter what, I have to have some experience in love. In the future, I still want to be healthy and have children with the person I love. So I don't have that kind of great idea of I can survive even if I'm alone. The implication was that Ayoko, who does not need to be in love, will definitely not be able to get married in the future. After all, Ayoko did equate love with wasting time. This unexpected attack caused unimaginable damage, and it made Ayoko's eyes twitch. And the group of students who witnessed the dangerous confrontation between the legendary transfer student and the president of the student council were boiling. Could it be that our school finally has a person who can suppress the president of the student council. Amazing. Too amazing. I'm so touched. No. I have to take out the special feature I have been hiding for a long time and share it with Noah. This way, I can show my respect to the transfer student. Even others were like this. As the vice president of the student council, Yuan Maru, who had been poisoned by Ayoko for 1 or 2 years, almost directly gave Noah the word convinced. Ayoko, who clearly heard the discussion behind her, held back her anger. She looked at Noah with a fake smile, and her eyes were fierce. Are you free after school? The same sentence. The same tone. But when she said it again, Ayoko's whole body emitted a frightening sense of oppression. The students who were still talking were like ducks who were strangled by the neck. Their voices came to an abrupt stop. They looked at each other, and then stepped back without any backbone. Noah laughed in his heart, and no longer teased Ayoko. He straightforwardly said, after school, I have to do tutoring. Even if the president of the student council wants to invite me on a date, I'm not free. Ayoko's head made a snap sound, as if something was broken. If it was someone else, even if they didn't beat up Noah, they would definitely turn around and leave. Unfortunately, the words defeat and convinced never existed in Ayoko's dictionary. For Ayoko, turning around and leaving was equivalent to admitting defeat. Therefore, the more Noah refused, the more angered Ayoko was, and the more difficult it was for Ayoko to face the difficulties. At this moment, Ayoko took a deep breath, calmly looked at Noah, and said in a businesslike manner, according to the rules of Mitsui High School, students are not allowed to work privately. Even if they apply, they can't work more than 4 hours a day without holidays. Hearing this, Noah raised his eyebrows. And then, Ayoko smiled. Her smile was very charming, but it also chilled everyone's heart. For hours I can still wait. I hope Noah-san won't let me wait too long. Chapter 292. No matter which world it was, the sun rises from the east, and the sun sets in the west, were eternal themes. The sun gradually set behind the mountains in the west and slowly turned red. The color of the clouds in the sky also turned bright red bit by bit. Dusk had arrived. Although the advancement of urbanization had already begun in Mayo City, 10 years was clearly not enough to turn Mayo City into a truly modern city filled with tall buildings. The setting sun shone on the still developing city, shining on the gradually disappearing scenes of the pastoral landscape, making the philosophical saying that the things that have passed away will never come back again truly show the cruel reality in front of people's eyes. Under the guidance of Ayoko, Noah arrived at the White Dog Mound in Mayo City. It was an area where ramps wound down from hills that were much higher than the ground. A long time ago, people believed that they should not live in places that were too high, so there were no signs of human habitation at a certain height. Similarly, the White Dog Mound was no exception. There were no houses on the hill. If one walked along the road and climbed up the slope, not long after, a forest would appear in front of the road, surrounding the asphalt road. On such a slope, Ayoko walked at a steady pace without stopping. Clearly, she was already very used to this kind of long journey. Beside Ayoko, Noah walked along the slope with a calm expression. Not to mention a difficult expression, there was not even a drop of sweat on his face. He even had the spare energy to observe the surroundings and enjoy the scenery. Although the physical ability was limited to the level of an ordinary person, the ordinary person here was naturally at a better level. If it was only climbing, it was not difficult for Noah at all. Not to mention, Noah also had the breathing technique that could quickly restore his physical strength and increase his endurance. Not to mention other things, his physical strength was definitely sufficient. This made Ayoko could not help but glance at Noah. I didn't expect your physical strength to be so good. No wonder you could beat up those senior students who were looking for trouble. So your good physical strength is also related to good fighting ? Noah did not turn his head and replied to Ayoko. Besides, isn't your stamina pretty good too? I'm just used to it. Ayoko's tone was quite casual, as if she was just brushing him off. but it was hard to get angry. Since you have such a good body, I'm even more relieved. Noah became suspicious. Rest assured. Ayoko glanced at the confused Noah and smiled. You'll be glad that you have good stamina later. After saying that, Ayoko turned her head away and stopped talking. She didn't want to talk to Noah anymore. She just continued to climb up the steep slope. Noah shook his head and followed. The ramp was indeed quite long. Even if they were to run, it would take about 20 minutes to reach the halfway point. Noah and Ayoko Aozaki walked up the ramp at a steady pace. When the sky turned even redder, they arrived at their destination. Ayoko brought Noah to an extremely old iron fence that was surrounded by walls and vines. Ayoko extended her hand and pushed it open. Noah was not surprised to see that Ayoko had stopped in front of Ayoko. Noah could see it. Behind the iron fence, there was a grassland covered with weeds, in what was supposed to be a courtyard. There were trees planted in the courtyard, but those trees were not green willows. Instead, they were old trees that seemed to have withered. The surroundings were gloomy, and there was even fog in the courtyard. It was like a haunted house, which made people feel numb. What made people feel even more numb was that between the gaps of the trees in the courtyard, there was a path that extended forward until it reached the front of a manor house. It was a manor house that looked quite luxurious, but exuded an ancient aura. Its scale was comparable to an average villa. There was a manor house in such a creepy place. It was believed that if people who did not know about it came here, they would definitely think it was a haunted house and leave screaming. Although Noah would not scream and leave, he still felt very strange that Ayoko had brought him here. Where is this? Originally, Noah did not expect Ayoko to give a reliable answer. However, when Ayoko answered, Noah realized that the answer was surprisingly reliable, and it could make everyone speechless. Ayoko Aozaki only said 2 words. My home. Your home. Noah looked at Ayoko with a different expression. It was as if he was looking at a mentally ill person. Although I know that you are used to acting alone, I didn't expect you to have such a unique taste. I won't comment. Although he said that, Noah's eyes were fixed on the manor house. As mentioned before, there were 2 large barriers in Sanyo City. One of them was used to survey and detect the movement of magic, and the other was used to gather the magic underground of Sanyo City in one place. At this time, Noah sensed that the magic underground of Sanyo City was gathered in the manor house in front of him. In other words, the person who lived in the manor house in front of him was the manager of Sanyo City's spiritual vein. Ayoko said that this was her home. In other words, Ayoko was indeed the manager of Sanyo City's spiritual vein. No, it should be said that she was one of the managers. The dark girl last night was obviously also the manager of Sanyo City's spiritual vein. It was very likely that she shared the spiritual vein of Sanyo City with Ayoko and lived here together. Noah could not help but mutter to himself. The girl who controlled the overly powerful tamed demon couldn't be here, right? Why did Ayoko bring him here? Did she discover his identity and want to bring him in to encircle him? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Noah was extremely stunned when Ayoko revealed her real purpose. Okay. Standing in front of the manor house's main entrance, Ayoko pointed at the weeds in the courtyard and gave an order, as if it was a matter of course. Pull out all the weeds here. What did you just say? Even Noah could not help but ask again. I didn't hear it very clearly. Say it again. I said pull out all the weeds here. Ayoko brushed her long hair. Her words and actions were very natural, as if she was saying, it's time to eat. She did not realize how difficult her words were. Noah fixed his gaze on Ayoko. When he realized that Ayoko's expression did not seem to be joking at all, but was very serious, he turned his head without hesitation and walked in the direction of the iron fence. However, after walking for a short while, Noah's body suddenly paused. Immediately, he took a small step to the left. Whoosh! At the same time, a slender leg, like a thick and heavy whip, hit the spot where Noah had been standing. Ha! Ayoko, who had thrown her leg without hesitation, was surprised, as if she did not expect Noah to be able to dodge her attack. Pa! While Aoko was still in a daze, Noah suddenly extended his hand and grabbed Aoko's ankle. Then with a forceful pull, Noah pulled Aoko's ankle in his direction. Aoko suddenly lost her balance and fell forward. Just as she was about to stabilize herself, she found that there was a leg in front of her only leg that was standing on the ground, tripping her slightly. Aoko, whose legs were suspended in the air, could not stabilize herself this time. She cried out in alarm and fell to the ground with a bang. She was in so much pain that she gritted her teeth. Alas! Noah, who was standing still, looked down at Aoko, who had fallen to the ground, and sighed heavily. Although I have long known that the student union president of Mitama High School is a very domineering person, I didn't expect him to be even more domineering than I imagined. Not only did he inexplicably ask people to pull out weeds, but he also kicked people casually. I say, President Ouchie, did you deliberately bring me here because you don't like me? Like those seniors, you want to show your power to the transfer students, right? What did you say? Aoko, who was grimacing in pain from the fall, was furious. She jumped up from the ground, made a gesture of kicking, and shouted out loud. I would never do such a thing. Undoubtedly, Aoko mercilessly threw out her leg again, bringing with it a fierce wind, in the direction of Noah. Seeing this, Noah shrugged, but there was a look of interest in his eyes. Chapter 293. Pa-dash. Goo-dash. A muffled sound was heard, followed by a muffled groan. Aoko, who was once again thrown to the ground by him, looked at him as if he was her enemy. Her face was full of stubbornness, and Noah couldn't help but feel amused. I say, President Aoko, you're not my opponent, shouldn't you stop? Who are you saying is not your opponent? Aoko stood up from the ground, but she felt like her whole body was about to fall apart, and her heart was filled with hatred. Aoko Aozaki was a magician. Aoko thought that she hid this matter well, but she didn't know that this matter was already known by the boy in front of her, who she hated to the core. If it was magic, Aoko certainly wouldn't lose to Noah, who was an ordinary person. However, the essence of magic was to hide. If an ordinary person witnessed the existence of magic, the magician who exposed the existence of magic must eliminate the witnesses. Aoko hated Noah to the core, but that was only anger, and not to the point where she wanted to kill Noah. Therefore, without exposing the existence of magic, if Aoko wanted to teach Noah a lesson, she naturally had to rely on ordinary means. Originally, Aoko also knew some fighting skills. Otherwise, the students of Mitsui High School would not be so afraid of her. It was because of these fighting techniques that Aoko was able to kick the former student council president, who had tried to pursue her and stalk her, out of her mind when she had just entered Sani High School. Aoko then applied to transfer to another school. With this great deed, Aoko's pursuers in Muron High School finally didn't dare to bother her anymore, and they were afraid of her like a tiger. I'm afraid that this was the reason why Oromaru gave such exaggerated advice to Noah, who was planning to pursue Aoko Aozaki, because he thought that it was him. Unfortunately, this fighting technique was no different from a child playing with mud in the eyes of Noah, whose fighting skills and fighting experience had long surpassed God. If it weren't for Noah deliberately controlling his strength, and deliberately changing her landing posture when she fell, so that Aoko would only feel a little pain and not be injured, she would have more or less suffered some superficial wounds. You still want to fight? Seeing that Aoko was about to rush up again, the smile on Noah's face disappeared little by little, and he finally had a headache. President Aoko, I heard that you hate people who pester you. What you're doing now is no different from pestering someone. Aoko was furious, but Aoko had to admit that she knew that she was no match for him, but she still rushed up to him like a pester. Aoko, who had nothing to say, could only glare at Noah. Her eyes were on the verge of spitting fire. In Aoko's heart, Noah must have become a hateful and loathsome person, just like the person who killed her father. Not fighting anymore? Noah shrugged. Then I'm leaving. Wait, Aoko Aozaki shouted. Pull out all the weeds before you leave. As soon as these words came out, Noah looked at Aoko as if he was looking at a crazy person. Are you sure you're serious? Aoko's expression changed. After a while, she finally put away her posture and looked straight at Noah with a sullen face. I understand. I didn't make it clear. I apologize. Aoko's tone returned to her usual indifferent and businesslike manner. Noah knew that Aoko had calmed down, so he didn't rush to leave. He stood there and looked at Aoko, indicating that she should explain. As you can see, there are indeed a lot of weeds here. My roommate, and I want to tidy up this place. Aoko seemed to have regained her composure. She also seemed to have forgotten that Noah had thrown her to the ground many times. She said this. Originally, I wanted to pay someone to help me clean up, but my roommate doesn't like humans, so I wanted to find someone to help. In the end, I'm the sacrifice. Noah sighed. Also, the reason for hating humans is really new. Also, does President Aoko think that I'm not human? Compared to someone who I don't know where they found you, you're still a student of my school. My roommate shouldn't be hostile to you for no reason. Aoko glanced at Noah. It's my fault for not making it clear in advance. We won't let you work for free. We'll pay you well. You don't have any objections, right? Noah wanted to say yes, but after thinking about it carefully, he dismissed the idea. This was Aoko's residence. The magical power of the spiritual vein in Sanyo City was also gathered here. Since Aoko was likely to be the manager of the spiritual vein in Sanyo City, and the girl who controlled the giant last night was also the manager of Sanyo City, then could there be a third manager? Since he had nothing to do, he might as well stay and observe the situation. Maybe he could find something new. As for pulling weeds, it was not a problem at all. In the world of fairy tale, Noah had trained in the deep mountains for 4 years. At that time, in order to train his physical strength, what kind of hard training did Noah not do? Pulling weeds? That was not hard at all. With this thought, Noah nodded and agreed. Since President has asked me for help, I'm just a transfer student. If I don't help, I might be bullied. It's better to be sensible. Aoko's mouth twitched. She kept telling herself not to be angry. If she was angry, she would fall into the enemy's trap and be led by the nose. Oh right. Noah, who was squatting down and preparing to pull weeds, turned around and smiled at Aoko. Remember the pay you mentioned? Aoko's temples were bulging with veins. She clenched her fists tightly, and her delicate body trembled. In the end, she realized that she could not control her anger at all, so she decided to just ignore it. I hope you can finish before the sky turns dark. Just as Aoko was about to enter the manor house, she seemed to have thought of something. She turned around and said to Noah in annoyance, "Don't worry. Also, no matter what, don't come into the mansion. Not even one step, if you still care about your life." Aoko left behind these words that were either a threat or a threat. She angrily entered the mansion and slammed the door. Noah, who had been watching Aoko enter the mansion, couldn't help but laugh. Noah's personality had always been to be in control. If others wanted to be domineering, Noah would be even more domineering. Therefore, when facing Aoko, who was also domineering, Noah couldn't help but want to tease her and suppress her. This naturally made Aoko, who was also domineering, hate Noah to the core. However, Noah didn't hate Aoko. After all, no matter how angry or domineering she was, Aoko had a good heart. Otherwise, after being bullied by Noah, Aoko wouldn't have remembered to warn Noah not to enter the mansion. The people living in the mansion were magicians. It wouldn't be strange to be killed if one broke into a magician's territory. Aoko still remembered to warn Noah. Wasn't this enough to prove that Aoko had a good heart? Seeing that you're thinking about me, I'll go easy on you next time. Noah laughed and shook his head. He rolled up the sleeves of his uniform before he started to pull out the weeds in the courtyard. He raised his eyes and looked at the sky. The corner of his mouth curved into a mischievous smile. Clap, 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 clap. In the sky above the mansion, a flock of gray starlings flapped their wings and hovered above the mansion. They stayed on the roof for a while, then flew up again. They hovered above the mansion and didn't leave the range of the mansion. This flock of gray starlings was the flock of magical birds that came to the forest when Noah first came to this world and touched the barrier of Sanyo City. They weren't ordinary birds but familiars. This flock of gray starlings was probably the manager of Sanyo City's spirit vein, Aoko, or perhaps the girl who controlled the giant used to investigate. That meant that even if it seemed like Noah was the only one left, one of the magicians in the mansion was also monitoring Noah. Things are getting more and more interesting. Chapter 294. The night came quietly. At that moment, the haunted house-like mansion was lit up with some lights. The lights shone on the courtyard that was surrounded by dead trees, bringing some light to it. In the courtyard, there were many black garbage bags filled with weeds piled up. At first glance, there were at least 10 or 20 of them. These black garbage bags were all filled with weeds. One could imagine how many weeds there were here. Noah, who had put on a pair of rough white gloves at some point in time, pulled out the last handful of weeds and stuffed them all into the garbage bag in his hand. Without panting or blushing, he patted the gloves that stirred up waves of dust. Not long after Noah began to pull out the weeds, Aoko came out of the mansion and threw a pair of gloves to Noah. Even though Aoko was very cold at that time, there was still no way to hide the fact that she was kind enough to give gloves to her enemy. This made Noah feel that Aoko was the kind of girl who had a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. But it seems like there are a lot of weeds here. Noah looked at the pile of garbage bags in front of him, which was taller than him, and was a little speechless. How long has it been since someone came here to do maintenance? As if to specifically respond to Noah's question, a lukewarm voice sounded from behind Noah. Yeah. I also want to know how long it has been since someone came here to do maintenance. Accompanied by such a voice, the sound of footsteps began to approach Noah. And there were 2 of them. Noah's face was not surprised. Obviously, he had already noticed that someone was approaching him from behind. He immediately turned around and looked behind him. What appeared in front of Noah were 2 equally breathtakingly beautiful girls. The one walking in front was naturally Aoko. Aoko's unique posture was unique. Aoko changed out of her uniform into casual clothes, and her full appearance was exposed to Noah. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater and a black pleated skirt. Her high socks and snow boots were the first to enter Noah's field of vision, as if she was deliberately showing off her presence. In addition, Aoko Aozaki was holding a down jacket in her hand, which was also white. Aoko did have the capital to attract a large group of suitors. Aoko already had a beautiful face and a good figure. Coupled with her straightforward personality, if she wasn't so violent, her suitors would have filled up the entire slope of the White Dog Catacombs. However, Noah turned his attention to the other young lady behind Aoko and stared at her gentle footsteps as she approached slowly. Compared with Aoko who exuded vitality, the girl behind her seemed to be in sharp contrast with Aoko. She was surrounded by a tranquil atmosphere, delicate like a doll's appearance, white pearl-like skin, slender like an animal's limbs. She was as petite as a doll. Her shoulder-length black hair swayed in the wind. His eyes were dark and deep. It was a girl darker than the night, but clearer than a lake. The person who came was the dark girl who controlled the giant last night. As Noah expected, the dark girl and Aoko lived together, and they were both managers of the spirit vein in Sanyo City. Accompanied by quiet footsteps, the dark girl once again appeared in front of Noah. Her pair of impressionable eyes without any emotion were staring at Noah. She was not afraid of Noah's gaze. If it was a young girl, even if she didn't have any strange thoughts in her heart, she would still unnaturally avoid looking at the opposite sex, right? But the girl did not have this concern at all. She looked at Noah. Although she was not sizing him up, Noah could feel that the girl in front of him was undoubtedly scrutinizing him. However, in the process of examining him, the young lady suddenly furrowed her brows, and her dark eyes deepened as she looked at Noah. Being stared at by such a pair of empty cold eyes, it was believed that even an iron man would find it unbearable. Noah wasn't affected much, but he pretended to look away and smiled at Aoko Aozaki. "Is your friend in a bad mood?" Hearing this, the demonic girl was still expressionless, but Aoko Aozaki burst out laughing. Don't mind it. Yuju is like this to everyone. She is just expressionless." This time, the girl could not continue to ignore him. She glanced at Ayoko, and Noah could clearly see a trace of dissatisfaction emerging in her eyes. It seemed that this doll-like little girl was not as emotionless as she looked on the surface. There was still a warm place in her heart. Her name was Yuju, right? Originally, Noah wanted to pretend that he did not know Yuju and greet her. But when he looked in Yuju's direction, his heart could not help but beat like a drum. Because from beginning to end, Yuju had been staring at Noah with emotionless eyes, as if she could see some secret from Noah. Even if the other party was Noah, he could not bear this oppressive silence. This made Noah very puzzled. Could it be that she recognized him? Yuju. Ayoko seemed to have noticed that Yuju's behavior was a little different from usual. But she did not ask Yuju anything. Instead, like Yuju, she looked at Noah and did not let go, being stared at by two girls who were very charming in all aspects. Noah could not stay calm no matter how calm he was, and immediately frowned. What are you two doing? Is there grass growing on my body? Ayoko silently looked at Yuju, but all she got in return was Yuju closing her eyes as if she had fallen asleep, which made Ayoko sigh. Don't blame me. I don't know what I'm doing now. You're done? As if deliberately changing the topic, Ayoko pointed to the black garbage bag pile. You're quite capable. You actually finished it when it was dark. As if satisfied with Noah's performance, Ayoko nodded. I'll give you the reward tomorrow at school. You can go back now. If you can take this garbage away, I'll be more grateful. That's all. After saying this, Ayoko walked out of the room, minding her own business. On the side, Yuju opened her eyes and stared at Noah for a while, then followed behind Ayoko and left the courtyard. Looking at Ayoko and Yuju pushing open the iron fence and leaving without hesitation, Noah looked up thoughtfully. Pa. As expected, the gray birds flapped their wings and hovered in the sky. As long as Noah took one step closer to the mansion, these familiars would report the situation here to Ayoko and Yuju, right? Obviously, although Ayoko and Yuju left, they didn't really feel at ease leaving Noah alone in their residence. However, it was already so late. Where were the two managers of Mayo City going? With this thought in mind, Noah also took off the gloves in his hand, casually threw them on the garbage bag pile, and walked out as if nothing had happened. There was no light on the ramp at night, making people afraid that some monsters would suddenly jump out from the forest next to them. What's wrong today? Walking on this slope that she had walked countless times, Ayoko frowned and asked Yuju who was beside her. Paying so much attention to those annoying humans? That doesn't seem like something you would do. I often do this when you're not here. Yuju didn't know if it was out of spite, or if it was really the case, but the expressionless Yuju responded softly. That person is your classmate? What? Ayoko's expression became slightly serious. Is there a problem? Yuju was still pondering, and after a while she shook her head. Nothing, just a little bit concerned. You actually care about someone you just met for the first time. Ayoko was really surprised. Ayoko was the only one who knew how cold her roommate was. At least, compared to Yuju, Ayoko felt that she was more humane. And as if she was impatient with Ayoko's shock, Yuju looked at Ayoko with condemnation and changed the topic. Are you ready? You don't have to keep confirming. Since I said I'm ready, then I'm ready. Ayoko's expression became serious, but immediately changed into stubbornness. I'll kill him. Chapter 295. There was no moon in the night sky today. Thick layers of dark clouds covered the entire dark night sky, shielding all the light sources in the sky on the other side. The bone-piercing cold wind seemed to want to freeze everything, bringing along an unbearable low temperature, pervading every corner of Mayo City. Da-da-da. Accompanied by the sound of powerful footsteps, at the end of the cold wind, two girls as dark as the night slowly walked out. Braving the bone-piercing cold wind, they arrived at a ruin. We're here. Yuju was the first to stop her footsteps, and even closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to be associated with Ayoko, retreating to the side. Compared to the expressionless Yuju, Aoko's expression was a lot more tense. Her face was full of a grim expression, and her usually fierce eyes were filled with a sinister expression. Her appearance was as if she was about to step into a battlefield. Is it here? Aoko looked straight ahead and asked without turning her head. According to the boundary, the location of the intruders is here? One of them, Yuju said indifferently. The other two were in the forest, but they've already been dealt with. Yuju was naturally referring to the two men who hid in the dark and launched a sneak attack last night, putting Yuju in danger. In this world, magicians were not so much a group of people who controlled power, but rather a group of people who researched power. The fundamental goal of magicians was to reach the source, and magic was only a means to achieve this goal. Therefore, magicians weren't necessarily strong, but they were definitely researchers. In order to research magic, magicians would usually choose a spiritual vein as their base of operations. With the support of a spiritual vein, magicians had a great advantage. For example, performing magic, setting up boundaries, preventing outsiders from entering, accumulating magic power, and so on. All of these were of great help to magicians. In addition, magicians spent more than half of their life on research, and some of the topics related to magic couldn't be separated from the support of magic power. In the case of limited magic power, the progress of research would be greatly limited. In this way, a spiritual vein with a large amount of magic power would naturally be in high demand. However, the spiritual veins in this world were either owned by a magician group for the purpose of researching magic, the Magic Association, or managed by the most prestigious magician family. Magicians from outside couldn't borrow the power of a spiritual vein. There were only 3 ways for magicians to borrow the power of a spiritual vein. 1. Apply to the Magic Association for the right to use the spiritual vein. 2. Reach an agreement with the magician family managing the spiritual vein to borrow the power of the spiritual vein. 3. Rob the spiritual vein. Aoko Aozaki and Yuju were currently encountering the third type of situation, which was a foreign magician who had come to snatch the spirit vein. The 2 fisheye men from yesterday were also one of them. The enemy they were about to encounter tonight was also one of them. As for Noah, who hid his identity, Aoko didn't know of his existence. Yuju also didn't say anything about what happened last night, intentionally or unintentionally hiding the matter of Noah. Unexpectedly in such a conspicuous place? Aoko, who didn't know this, nodded heavily. She looked around the ruins and fixed her eyes on the road not far away. She was speechless. Yuju, has the boundary been set up? Yuju didn't speak. Aoko knew that with Yuju's personality, she might have already set up a boundary when she arrived at the scene. Although it wasn't a big deal, it was a pity that Aoko was just an apprentice magician. Aoko had been learning magic for about 1.5 years, not even 2 years. Compared to Aoko, Yuju had been practicing magic since she was a child, and was now an outstanding magician who could take charge of her own tasks. Compared to Aoko, who was still a novice magician, Yuju was a true magician. She had always followed the rules of a magician, to the point that she was rigid in her actions. Thus, Aoko Aozaki aside, Yuju would definitely carry out the concealment is the essence of magic from beginning to end. Compared to Yuju, Aoko was indeed much weaker. At least, the gap was not small at all. Of course, Aoko had her own uniqueness. However, this uniqueness wasn't something that Aoko could rely on right now. Therefore, tonight could be said to be the day of Aoko's transformation. This was because Yuju wouldn't interfere in tonight's battle. This was Aoko's first battle. It was also her first battle, where she decided to abandon human morality and kill with her own hands. It was easy to imagine how important this was to Aoko, who had been living the life of an ordinary person not long ago, and followed the norms of an ordinary person's behavior. However, Aoko wouldn't run away. Running away wasn't something that Aoko would do. Therefore, Aoko had to bury the human part in her heart. Kacha kacha. At this time, a mechanical sound was heard from the other side of the ruins. Aoko instantly reacted. She suddenly turned around looked in the direction of the sound, and raised one of her hands. Buzz! On Aoko's arm, a burst of light suddenly flashed, penetrating her clothes and illuminating her dignified face. Taking a closer look, the light bloomed from a tattoo under Aoko's sleeve. That was the magic engraving. The magician had spent his entire life's energy to fix and stabilize the magic that originally had no substance. It was purely a bunch of tactics, so that they could become a part of his body. The result of this was the magic seal. The magic engraving, on Aoko's body, was the crystallization of magic passed down from generation to generation. With it, even if Aoko was just an apprentice magician, she could instantly use fixed magic, like those outstanding magicians. However, just when Aoko decided to activate the magic engraving, to kill the intruder on the side, Yuju suddenly raised her head, her dark eyes staring at the pile of stones in front of her. Yuju! Aoko was slightly startled. When she was about to ask, an unforeseen event happened. Bang! In the pile of stones, a heavy muffled sound directly hit Aoko's and Yuju's heart, and suddenly exploded. Whoosh! Then, a black shadow was thrown out of the pile of stones like garbage, and fiercely hit the ground. Bang! Immediately, the black shadow shattered into pieces and scattered all over the ground. That was actually a puppet. Whoosh! Aoko and Yuju didn't have time to react. In the original pile of stones, a figure rushed out at an extremely fast speed, turned a corner, and disappeared at the end of the road outside the ruins. Aoko and Yuju only then reacted. The two girls knew that they had been fooled. They originally thought that the intruder was here, but in the end, it was only an automatic puppet sent by the other side. And obviously, there was another person here just now. Don't run! Aoko was slightly surprised. Yuju, chase! Aoko said, but found that Yuju didn't move at all. She suddenly gritted her teeth and chased out. At the scene, only Yuju stood in the same place, staring at the figure and the direction Aoko disappeared in. Her dark eyes didn't have the slightest trace of emotion. In the dark alley, Noah dodged and came out from the other side. His eyebrows wrinkled a little, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I was actually discovered in such a situation. Originally, Noah was just hiding in a corner, intending to observe Aoko and Yuju. In the end, unexpectedly, a puppet suddenly pounced on Noah, who was hiding in the pile of stones. Noah, who had the sensing ability, naturally couldn't be ambushed, but he reflexively kicked the puppet away. Therefore, as the puppet fell in front of Aoko and Yuju, Noah was also exposed. However, that puppet should be controlled by a magician. Noah thoughtfully touched his chin. And the two men with the split mouth who attacked Yuju last night. It seems that Sanyi City is more chaotic than I thought. Chapter 296. Ha! 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 Aoko, who had exhausted a lot of stamina from running, couldn't help but gasp for air. She tugged at the collar of her down jacket and scanned her surroundings. Where did he go? Why didn't the barrier react? Although Aoko didn't know what exactly happened, she could guess it with a little bit of effort. Just now, there must have been a third person hiding in the dark. For some reason, he got rid of the automaton and then turned to run. Needless to say, there must be a magician controlling the automaton. And that magician was the person Aoko and Yuju were going to deal with tonight. But now, it was one thing for the owner of the doll to not appear. At most, it would mean that the owner had sent the doll out to fool Aoko and Yuju. But what was up with this other person who had mysteriously jumped out of nowhere? The barrier didn't react, right? In other words, there was no magic on the other party. Could it be that the person who got rid of the automaton was an ordinary person? Aoko, who had such a thought in her mind, felt her heart turn cold. Aoko wasn't surprised that an ordinary person got rid of an automaton controlled by a magician. After all, automatons were similar to familiars. They both served their masters, and were objects of their masters. However, there were strong and weak familiars. The strong ones, like the giant controlled by Yuju, where at least 80 to 90% of magicians couldn't do anything to it. The weak ones, like the gray starling, were only used for detection, but their strength was not much stronger than ordinary birds. If they were caught, they could be crushed in minutes. It was the same for automatons. It wasn't strange that an ordinary person could get rid of them. It was because of this that Noah, who didn't release his power, was able to send it flying with a kick and let it smash into pieces without much effort. Damn it! Ayoko clenched her fists and stood up in anger. It better not be an ordinary person. Ayoko had never killed anyone before. Tonight, she was determined to kill the intruder. But who would have thought that such an episode would happen? If the person he was killing was magician, it would be fine. After all, both sides were gambling with their lives. But to kill ordinary people in order to hide the existence of magic, that would be harming the innocent. Ayoko Aozaki was not a person with a strong sense of justice. But at the same time, Ayoko Aozaki wasn't someone who would disregard human lives. No matter what, Ayoko Aozaki was just an ordinary human 2 years ago. Therefore, Ayoko's first reaction was to resist such a method. It better not be an ordinary person. Ayoko could only pray. Noah, who was hiding in a nearby alley, saw Ayoko's anxious appearance, and a smile flashed across his eyes. Just as he was about to hide in the dark, he suddenly stopped. Hoo-hoo. At this moment, the two black shadows were like rapidly bouncing rubber balls. With a swift and fierce sound of wind, they rose and fell a few times, streaking across space, and pounced towards Noah, who had his back facing them. Slap! Without the slightest hesitation, Noah stomped hard on the ground and dodged aside by a hair's breadth. Kacha! Kacha! This was the sound of a huge beast opening and closing its mouth full of sharp teeth. The two ball-like black shadows suddenly fell on the spot where Noah was just a moment ago. Their bodies began to split evenly from the middle and turned into two sharp crocodiles. They bit down viciously at Noah's position, causing some sparks to fly. If Noah had stayed in that place just now, he would definitely have been bitten by the two sharp mouths of the crocodiles in front of him, regardless of the consequences. Noah, who had steadied himself, finally saw the full appearance of the two black shadows. They had the appearance of pigs, but their bodies were covered with stitches and stitches like dolls. Their bodies were about 1 meter long. He dodged it. He dodged it. He dodged it. The two little pigs were suspended in midair. Their bodies were moving back and forth without any pattern. Two noises could be heard from their bodies. How could he dodge it? How could he run? Wouldn't it be better if he let us eat him? Wouldn't it be better if he let us bite him? Master is going to scold us for being useless again. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Noises that were comparable to noises kept coming out from the two little pigs, who were talking to themselves, which surprised Noah a little. Are these also familiars? Just as the voice fell, a burst of chaotic footsteps came from afar, making Noah's heart feel bad. He quickly wanted to leave. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. The two noisy piglets jumped down from the air and blocked Noah's path, making Noah helplessly stop. The sound of footsteps came to an abrupt end. Ayoko, who was standing at the entrance of the alley, looked at Noah, who was blocked by the two piglets. Her pale eyes first flashed with a touch of astonishment, followed by disbelief, and finally turned into coldness and awareness. She looked straight at Noah, her pretty face congealed, and her voice was emotionless. I didn't expect it to be you, Noah-san. Your luck is really bad. Noah, who had seen Ayoko adjust her emotions in a short time, felt admiration and helplessness in his heart. In the end, was he still exposed? Of course, for Noah, it was best if he could not expose his identity. Even if he did, it was not a big deal. Therefore, Noah relaxed his body and very casually greeted Ayoko. Hello, President. It was as if he had met an acquaintance by chance on the road, extremely natural. This infuriated Ayoko Aozaki. Yes, I am very good, very good. Ayoko's expression gradually became cold. But unfortunately, Noah-san, you are not very good. You are wrong, President. Noah shrugged. I will be very good, even if someone is not good. It is not destined to be me. While saying this, Noah tilted his head and looked behind Ayoko. Could it be that Miss Yuju also wants me to be bad? Under Noah's gaze, Yuju, whose whole body was wrapped in pitch-black clothes, slowly walked over. Her pair of dark eyes were as empty as before, and she was firmly silent, not saying a word. Coming. We are going to be scolded. We are going to be scolded. The little piglets, who were like rubber balls, immediately did a somersault in the air and bounced back to Yuju's side. They floated to the left and right of Yuju's body, twisting their fat bodies restlessly. You can't blame us. You can't scold us. It's not that we are useless. It's not that we are not good. It's just that the human is too cunning. Yuju seemed to have grown impatient with the two little pigs squawking beside her ears. She closed her eyes, and the two little pigs' voices immediately followed her body. Like mist, they disappeared without any warning. Then, Yuju reopened her eyes and looked at Noah. You are the person from last night? Hearing Yuju's words, Ayoko was stunned for a moment. Then, she reacted and looked at Noah with a sinister expression. You are also a magician? Hearing this, Noah raised his eyebrows and smiled. Bang! As if a dam that had been blocked for a long time was opened in an instant. The stormy waves of magic turned into a torrential airflow, bursting out from Noah's body. The surging magic airflow turned into a gust of wind. The gust of wind turned into a storm. The storm turned into a substantial impact, suddenly attacking in all directions, stirring up a thick cloud of dust, spreading like thunder. Ayoko and Yuju, one was shocked, the other was shocked. They both raised their hands and blocked in front of themselves. The way they looked at Noah had changed. Is this magic? Impossible, right? Can a human have such a degree of magic? While the black-clothed Yuju was shocked, she finally confirmed the identity of the other party. This magic aura, Yuju could not be wrong. It was exactly the same as the person who had a short confrontation with Yuju last night and saved her life. Ayoko bit her lips and stared at Noah. With such a strong magic, how did he manage to deceive the detection of the barrier? Chapter 297. The creator of Sanyo City's barrier wasn't Ayoko or Yuju, but the Ayoko family, Ayoko's grandfather, who was responsible for managing the spirit vein in Sanyo City. The Ayoko family was responsible for managing the spirit vein in Sanyo City, so they were very good at managing the spirit vein and resisting outsiders. In addition, the creator of Sanyo City's barrier was the previous manager of the spirit vein in the Ayoko family. In theory, if it wasn't a magician more capable than Ayoko's grandfather, then it was impossible to break the barrier in Sanyo City. However, the more outstanding a magician was, the more difficult it was to completely hide their magic power. Not to mention Noah, who casually squandered his magic power and released it in the most wasteful way for no reason, had a smile on his face, but in terms of magic power, he was already inhumanly strong. With such a degree of magic power, it would be very difficult to hide even a part of it. Ayoko and Yuju didn't believe that such magic power could be hidden so perfectly in such a sensitive barrier. Even Ayoko, who they met almost every day at school, didn't notice it. Of course, the two girls didn't know that Noah actually didn't have a way to completely hide his magic power. Or rather, Noah didn't know how to hide his magic power at all. The reason why Noah was able to hide his magic power was only because of the ability of limit, which shielded and buried the sealed power. If he hadn't come to this world, Noah wouldn't have known that limit had such an additional ability. Therefore, Noah's answer to Ayoko's words was also the same. It's just a little trick, President Sama, don't mind it. Ayoko wanted to refute Noah, but in the end, she held back. Yuju didn't move and didn't say anything more. In any case, it was a fact that this boy of the same age was an enemy. It was useless to say anything more. Stomp! With a loud stomp, Ayoko suddenly took a step back and stretched out her hand to Noah. Connect! Like a spell, the word Ayoko spat out directly turned into a key and opened the power in Ayoko's body. As a result, the light of magic engraving once again bloomed from Ayoko's arm. A mechanical sound similar to that of an engine echoed from the arm that was emitting an ominous azure light. Witnessing all this happen, the smile on Noah's face gradually disappeared, and after a long while he sighed. You really chose to make a move. Shut up. Ayoko pointed her hand at Noah, as if she was pointing a gun at him. She yelled angrily. I've been wanting to give you a good beating for a long time. The patterns bullet. SSS gun. S revolus. 4. S. S the. S. Sin. SSS. S. 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 Bang 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 bang. In the next moment, the sound was almost the same as the sound of a gun, but it was unusually loud, and turned into an echo. Accompanied by the faint blue light, it rubbed against the air, cut through space, and violently shot out. The faint blue flashes were extremely bright and dazzling light bullets. Or it could be called magic bullet. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In the sharp sound of breaking through the air, the faint blue magic bullet turned into a faint blue light and mercilessly fell in Noah's direction. His vision was filled with phosphorescent light. Looking at the magic bullet, rapidly approaching, Noah just calmly raised his hand. The scabbard that released a golden light flashed from Noah's hand, and in the light, it disintegrated into pieces of dreamlike crystal, forming a beehive-like barrier in front of Noah. The faint blue magic bullet heavily landed on the dreamlike barrier. Bang 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 bang. In the midst of the muffled sound, the light bullets formed by magic power exploded on the dreamlike barrier, turning into beautiful blue sparks, stirring up bursts of smoke and dust, and beautifully dissipating like fireworks. No way. Ayoko, whose arm was still flickering with faint blue light, was stunned. It was not that Ayoko was very confident in her magic bullet. She had already expected that the magic bullet alone wouldn't have much of an effect against an opponent with such a vast amount of magic power. However, Ayoko really didn't expect that it would be completely ineffective. Ayoko, don't be impulsive. On the side, the motionless Yuju frowned and stared at the dreamlike barrier in front of Noah. That's not an ordinary wall. You can't break it. Wall? Ayoko was startled. Oh, did you notice? Noah, whose whole body was protected by the dreamlike crystal barrier, slightly raised the corner of his mouth. That's right. It's a wall. Wall. The scabbard's protection was indeed a wall. On the surface, the scabbard's barrier seemed to be able to block all incoming attacks. But in fact, the scabbard's real power was not blocking, but isolating. You should have heard of it, right? Noah's voice slowly drilled into Ayoko and Yoju's ears. This is a noble artifact called Avalon. Noble artifact. Ayoko's expression changed. Unlike Aozaki Ayoko, Yuju reacted to the word Avalon and suddenly raised her head. Avalon. Legend has it that it was the eternal spring of King Arthur, and its true form was the scabbard that was crowned with the name Fairyland. Not only was it able to completely heal the user of any degree of injury, it could even stop the aging of the human body. If its true name was released, it could also be broken into hundreds of pieces to protect the owner from any interference. In terms of individual combat, it could be called a mobile fortress. Yuju was right. Avalon did not block all incoming attacks, but it placed Noah in the middle of Fairyland, isolating and excluding all external physical interference, just like a wall. It was a noble artifact that had reached the realm of magic, the strongest protection in this world. Therefore, what Gaia and Alea bestowed upon Noah was not an extremely powerful strength, nor was it an invincible weapon. Instead, it was absolute safety. With Avalon, no matter which world it was, as long as Noah's magic was not exhausted, there was almost no threat to his life. So, there's no point in continuing the fight. Noah looked straight at Ayoko and Yuju, spreading his hands. I won't continue to play with you. Leaving such a sentence, Noah casually waved at Ayoko and Yuju, as if he was bidding farewell to a friend, turned around and walked to the other side of the alley. Wait! Ayoko was about to call out to Noah, but was stopped by Yuju. It's useless. Yuju was like a statue. She did not have any expression, nor did she move. She only said those words. We're in trouble, Ayoko. Ayoko could not help but move her lips, but in the end, she could not say anything. Facing Avalon, which could be said to be the strongest guardian and mobile fortress in this world. Ayoko and Yuju were helpless. Not to mention other things, just the existence of a noble artifact was not something that a normal magician could deal with. If the other party wanted to seize Sanyo City's spiritual vein, they could just swagger around and destroy the barrier of Sanyo City. Once the owner of the barrier was changed to someone else, Sanyo City's spiritual vein would no longer belong to Ayoko and Yuju. Let's go back and think of a way to deal with it. Yuju's words were concise and to the point. This will be the biggest problem we've ever faced. Ayoko nodded with a heavy heart, many thoughts flashing through her mind. Unfortunately, although Ayoko had many thoughts in her mind, she did not think that Noah would not seize the spiritual vein. If Ayoko knew that Noah didn't even know how to use the spirit vein, what kind of expression would she have? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.